All right, we are live. Welcome to Paradigm Shift TV 314. This is your brother, Pianki Patah Muntu Nefer Amun Ra. And y'all know what it is. We got a powerful show with two powerful brothers. Before I had them introduce themselves and do their opening spiel, let me do my spiel. Let me say hotep to my fellow Kemetic brothers and sisters. Let me say God bless to my Christian brothers and sisters. Let me say Islam to my Moorish brothers and sisters. Let me say assalamu alaikum to my brothers and sisters in the NOI. Let me say peace to my brothers and sisters in the nation of gods and earth, them 5%ers. And let me say jumbo to the rest of my brothers and sisters throughout the African diaspora, be it here, in the wilderness and hills of the United States of America or beyond. Y'all know I say that greeting for one reason and one reason only. If you're Black, I'm with you, and I hope you with me. Our different ideologies shouldn't keep us from uniting. We can have unity without uniformity, and we can disagree without being disrespectfully disagreeable. With that, my brother Richie Garfield, please introduce yourself and let everybody know what you're going to be laying down today.
What's up, man? Richie Garfield here from Yeshua the Movement, out here making the four gospels combined for people like Chris, for people like Bianca, who basically, can't see Christ in the culture. So hopefully, what I'm saying, we're making this movie to let them know that Christ is for everyone, not just for the Europeans, not just for the Africans, it's for every human being. You can check us out on our website, yeshuatm.net. And tonight, basically, we're just going to present to you the facts of the Bible.
All right. My brother MVP, speak your speech.
Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Chris Harris. I'm pretty sure everybody knows who I am. We're going to be discussing the Exodus today, and many people approach me about a debate or debating about the Exodus. I teach that the Exodus is not a historical. It's not a historical event. There was never a group of people in Egypt called the Israelites. No man named Moses ever existed. I think it's just a myth to give a certain group of people that were moved into that area around 700, 600 BCE a destiny for themselves. Once again, I once even thought about saying that my beloved brother Richie Garfield is going to be using a revisionist method. But after reading carefully the definition of revisionism, that is the interpretation or reinterpretation of a historical event, introducing new evidence into the account. But unfortunately, the Exodus is not a historical account. I want to make this clear. My brother Richie Garfield is, in fact, a affirmative in this debate, and he's going to be proving without the shadow of a doubt that the Exodus occurred according to many of his theories. My position is as the negative, and I am here to say that no, a Exodus never occurred. The dates that Richie Garfield has given actually do not line up with that of the biblical narrative. The Bible is the authority in a debate like this, and it's the authority because we don't hear about a historical Exodus anywhere or nowhere but except in the Bible. Once again, this is not a slander against anybody's faith. This is certainly not a slander against my brother Richie Garfield, and I would love for him to come on my platform and continue to be a guest on this platform, and maybe we can have many more debates on this platform. Once again, this is something new for me because for once I'm not arguing with a bunch of ghetto motherfuckers about something that I enjoy talking about. So I'm really going to enjoy this one. So brother Pianki Patah Muntu Nefer Amun Ra, my beloved brother Hotep, thanks for letting me on. Shout out to the Paradigm Shift television family. Team Osiris, we are on the horizon. Black Intelligentsia Guerrilla family. Shout out to the squad. Team Darkside, we still in the building.
No doubt. And you already know MVP, my casa, su casa. Salute to Team Osiris. So, Richie, we agreed that you are going to be going first.
Mm-hmm.
So, we said 20 minutes. Let me make sure I got my timer straight. Give me just a second. Here we go. We said 20 minutes, right? Not 15?
Yeah.
All right. So, time to start when you start, my brother.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen here.
Just a quick question. Do you want me to keep my camera on while Richie debates, or would you like for me to turn it off?
It's your preference, bro. Whatever you comfortable with.
What do you want to do, Richie? Because sometimes I know cameras can be disturbing.
No, I'm gonna be going through my slides, so I'm not gonna be focused on what's going on the screen in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll leave it on then. I'll leave it on unless I got to get up or something like that because I don't want to look rude. Okay,
yeah, definitely. All right, so entire screen. All right, boom, y'all can see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let's get with it. Is the biblical Exodus historical, and were the Israelites slaves in ancient Kemet? So just like with any math formula, like an algebra equation, you got your givens, you got your unknowns. So we're going to kind of approach it with that. So this is our givens that we're going to be using in this debate. The givens are the biblical narrative, like he said before, ancient Kemet dynastic chronology, and I made this all caps for a reason, which I'll explain later, and carbon dating. So these are all of our givens. The unknowns are the names of the biblical pharaohs and the time period of the Exodus. The solution here is to basically match up the biblical narrative with ancient Egyptian chronology without changing the narrative or chronology. So if you catch me changing the Bible or you catch me changing Egypt, I'm guilty. So let's get into it. The Amenhotep II mural. It's basically a group of West Asiatic foreigners, possibly Canaanites, labeled as Amu, including the leading man with a Nubian ibex labeled as Habisha the Hyksos, or what Egypt called it was a Heka Kashut, and we call it Hyksos from the Greek interpretation of that word. And basically, his tomb was of the 12th dynasty, and he served under pharaohs Senusret III and who's the other one? It was two pharaohs here. Hold on. Okay, let's just move on. I have the name over here somewhere. So the Amenhotep mural opens a vague. This is from Simpson. His name is right here, and excuse me if I'm pronouncing names wrong. The Amenhotep mural opens a vague possibility that the mythological Hebrew personalities like the Bedouin shepherds Abraham and Joseph could have been among the Asiatic Bedouins who frequently traveled to Egypt during the 12th dynasty, and that they may have even been the Shasu Bedouins. But as usual, it would be too simple to conclude at anything but vague theoretical possibilities. Judging strictly on biblical descriptions, Abraham could also have been a Hebrew from Mesopotamia who made goods and settled down in the Hebron region. So basically, we all know that Abraham came from Ur, which is basically Mesopotamia. So he's a Mesopotamian. So what this guy is saying is that this Amenhotep mural opens up the possibility. Now, they're not saying this, this is who the Israelites were, but the reason is because the Amu was a contemporary term used to distinguish the people of Avaris from Egyptians. It was long used before the Second Intermediate Period and was still in use long after Ramses II in order to denote, in general sense, the inhabitants of Syria, Palestine. All right? And here it says the term Hyksos is derived from this word right here, Heka Kashut, and it just basically means rulers of foreign countries. But basically, when we think about the Hyksos, right, we think about the 14 and 15 dynastic rulers because of Manetho from the Greek historian, which came about, was it 3rd century BC? But we only know of his writings from Josephus. So, because of their interpretation of it, we label the Hyksos as only those dynasties. But the term Hyksos just means generally foreign rulers from foreign lands. And there was also read somewhere that it was also applied to certain Nubian rulers, but I couldn't find the resource for that, so I didn't put that in here. And here we have a man described as Habisha the Hyksos, and this is basically on this painting right here, and he's right here. So the reason why I'm showing this guy right here is because of his name, Habisha, right? And what you notice about this name is that it is found 24 times in the Hebrew Bible. And it's right here, Habishai. And right here, you see it right here, means the father of a gift. So basically what we have here is that we have a man with a Hebrew name on an Egyptian wall. All right. So what I've done was that, and before I'm going to show you this date right here. Before I'm going to show you how I got to this date. The Amenhotep was an ancient Egyptian great chief during the reign of Pharaoh's. Here we go. Pharaoh's Amenhotep II and Sennacherib. Right.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
I stopped your time. You right on just under 15 minutes.
Already.
Can you expand that a little bit where people can see it a little better?
Yeah. Let me
hit present. Just hit present. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
So I'm at 15 minutes right now. Dang, that time go by quick.
Yeah, so 14:58 to be exact.
Okay. So right now I'm choosing this date as 1904 BC, which is basically going to be under the reign of Amenhotep II. I'm going to show you how I got to this date, because what I'm doing right now, I'm showing you my conclusion that how I came to this date first. I'm going to go backwards like a derivative, like calculus, right? So I'm choosing this date as Jacob's arrival in Egypt because of that mural of Habesha the Hyksos. I'm saying, okay, we have Asiatics who are at peace with the Egyptians, and they're coming to visit Amenhotep at his funeral, right? So what the heck? We also have an Avarit statue, which is right here, that dates from 1820 to 1785 BC. And we also found there's a small pyramid tomb for Asiatic dignitary. And we know that there was no body found in this tomb. We do know that the bones of Joseph were the children of Israel brought from Egypt. So basically, we know that when the children of Israel left Egypt, they took the body of Joseph with them. And here we have like an Asiatic tomb with an Asiatic man with no bones in the tomb. And we know that Joseph died around 1833 BC based on the 1904 arrival date that I put before of Jacob. I have to go through this quick right now. Okay. Now we're going to the scripture now. The sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. But notice in the Septuagint, it says the sojourning of the children of Israel while they sojourned in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, 430 years. Notice they said the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan. So we always come to the assumption that, the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves for 400 years. But it doesn't say that. It says that in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, if you use the Septuagint. And I'm not going to get into the Masoretic versus the Septuagint right now, because that's like a whole other debate. So here we have some dates now where we could go from the 1904 date. We can start advancing the dates now. We know that there's 25 years past from the time of Abraham's arrival, 60 years past at the birth of Isaac, and 130 years past from the birth of Jacob. So the sum of all this time right here, and you could go back and check the dates from the scriptures, is 215 years, thus leaving another 215 years for the actual stay in Egypt. So that means that the Exodus, if we chose 1904 as a date of Jacob's arrival, that the Exodus will basically be in 1689 BC. If you just minus from 1904, the 215 years here. What about the 400 years of affliction that the Bible talks about? They're saying that, your seed shall be a sojourner in the land not their own, and shall enslave them and afflict them and humble them for 400 years. So, but it says right here, it does not say that they shall be in Egypt for 400 years. It should be in a land not their own. So we know when they was in Canaan and when they was in Egypt, none of those lands belonged to them at the time. So what we're going to do is basically, I have this chart right here. We start in the 430 years from when God makes a promise to Abraham, right? And the 400 years of slavery, of the persecution, is going to happen when Ishmael mocks his first seed. And we know from Galatians, it says that, Ishmael persecuted Isaac. So we go down here. Joseph reveals himself, and Jacob meets Pharaoh. It's 215 years, right? And then when we go down here, we have the Exodus for the next 215 years. So boom, we got 1904, Jacob arrives in Egypt. Only 215 years left. Exodus would occur in 1904 minus 215 would be 1689 BC. So now we have a date. So let's look at which dynasties ruled at this date. We know that the 14th dynasty ruled from Avaris over Lower Egypt, which is North Egypt. And the 13th dynasty ruled from Memphis over Middle and Upper Egypt. And this is the time period right here. So we know that Avaris is basically the old city of Pi Ramses. So we gotta have to focus on on Upper Egypt. No, Lower Egypt, which is the North Egypt. So if the 1689 is basically we putting as an Exodus from the 215 years. So if we add 40 years, go backwards, because we know that when Moses fled Egypt, he was 40 years old. He was 80 when the Exodus occurred. So we go back, we have 1729 when he fled Egypt. Go back another 40 years, we got 1769 at the birth of Moses. And these are the kings that we have for these time periods. So Yakbing II Nahare will be the first king of the 14th dynasty. And here's a key thing. The king who did not know Joseph, right? So if we really look at it, right? We talk about like if Joseph was so cool with Egypt, right? And he had all these dynasties that came after that. How can it be a Egyptian black dynasty that does not know Joseph? That's like me saying, like, you know, if I live in New York, right, and then, you know, we have governors. Say we didn't have the internet and nothing like that, right? And we're trying to elect a new governor. Every governor should know about New York, right? But if we hire a governor from a foreign land, I shouldn't expect him to know about MLK. So it makes sense that, you know, the dynasty that would enslave the Egyptians will be basically a foreign dynasty. So we have here Amenhotep as the pharaoh when Moses fled Egypt, and Sheshi Mabri would be the pharaoh of the actual Exodus, based on these dates right here. So why not the city of Ramses, but Avaris? If you look at it in Genesis 47:11, it mentions Joseph and the land of Ramses. So if it mentioned the lands of Ramses in Genesis, right, and we know that Joseph came before, if you're trying to imply that the Exodus occurred during the times of Ramses because of, you know, they built the city of Ramses. So we know that Joseph came before Ramses, but why are they mentioning Ramses in Genesis? This just indicates that the Bible that we have today was compiled during the time of Ramses. So they built the city of Avaris, but when the Bible was written, the city at the time was Ramses. So they're just referring to Avaris as Ramses. Now Salatus, right? He was called the first pharaoh of the Hyksos dynasty. We don't find the name Salatus anywhere in Egyptian records. Manetho claims the foreign ruler's rule for 284 years, right? And this is from Josephus. But from Egyptian chronology, we know the 14th dynasty lasted 115 years, 157 years, and the 15th lasted 118 years for a total of 275 years. So this means that Manetho is combining both the 14th and 15th dynasty together, because you see the years kind of match right here. And Jürgen von Beckerath, who is an Egyptologist, he is the first one who equated Yakbin, who was basically this guy right here, Yakbin II Nahare, as with Salatus. Now look at the account of Salatus from Manetho regarding Avaris. It says that he established a city and rendered it extremely secure with walls, sending there a large body of armed troops, as many as 240,000 men at the frontier guard, right? And look at the biblical narrative about the city of Avaris, which they called Ramses at the time. And he set over them taskmasters who should afflict them in their works, and they built strong cities. This is from the Septuagint now, strong cities. Salatus or Yakmin, he basically established a city and rendered it with extremely with secure walls, strong cities, secure walls. So right here we have a first instance of the narrative matching, you know what I'm saying, history. What about the drowning of male babies? What we find out in this time period, right, during the 14th and 13th dynasty and 15th dynasties, we find basically more local, non-local females than males, meaning that they found out in the city of Avaris, you had more Asiatic females than males, right? So what could have caused this, you know, influx of and they're not talking about, you know, just every male, they're talking about the Asiatics. You got more Asiatic females than males in the burial grounds, right? And basically, we know that Pharaoh charged all his people that every son that is born shall be cast into the Nile. So here we have the biblical narrative, and here we have a historical and scientific research that matches the narrative of basically you have 77% more females than non-local males. What about, you know, I'm going real fast, man, because of the time limit, but we could talk about this in the question Q&A. What about any records of slaves and servants? We know from the Brooklyn Papyrus, right? We have a papyrus here from the Southern Kingdom, which is northern Upper Egypt, right? That there was a Theban woman who had a list of slaves, right? And about, they say 70%, 45 of these names in that list in the Brooklyn Papyrus were of Asiatic origin. So here you have Asiatic servant names in the Upper Kingdom. And we know that basically when the 14th dynasty first came about, right, there was first a rivalry, but after a while, they started to trade with one another. So it seems like that they could have got these slaves from the 14th dynasty. And here's what basically they talk about the 13th dynasty now when it comes to, like, you know, the time period. There are indications that towards the end of the 13th and 14th dynasties, I remember now, 13th dynasty are the Black Egyptians, the 14th are the Asiatic pharaohs. The fertile Nile Delta was ravaged by decades of famine, with more than 50% of the food production of ancient Egypt coming from this region. It is very unlikely that Upper Egypt, the realm of the 13th dynasty, suffered as much. Weakened by eternal power struggles, famine, and plagues that invariably accompanied longer periods of famine, the last kings of the 13th dynasty were no match for a group of foreign invaders, which were known as the Hyksos. We're just talking about the 15th dynasty now. Even if, you know, talking about the 14th dynasty, you know, for nourishment, for visions, you know, this period is a period of mass. Look at here, we got functioning mass graves. You got graves where people were dying so much in this time period that they had mass grave burials, right? Following the very short reign of Nahisi, most scholars among them, Manfred B. Tech and Kim agree that the Delta region was struck by prolonged famine and perhaps a plague that lasted until the end of the 14th dynasty. And here, here's the references right there. So when you talk about the evidence of the plagues, right? When we look at it, if you talk about the biblical plagues, if you apply those plagues to any civilization, right? Unless God heals the land afterwards, no civilization will come back from that thing right away. So if you're trying to say that the Exodus happened in the time of Ramses or the time of the New Kingdom would have been broken apart. You know what I'm saying? Here you have a document that's dated between 1850 to 1450, and we find evidence of the document in the New Kingdom on the papyrus, the Ipuwer papyrus, right? And you have a straight up like similarity between the plagues of the Exodus written in Egypt and talking about the same time period that we're talking about, the 14th and 13th dynasties, the Ipuwer papyrus. Let's go to Jericho real quick. One of the things that they were saying about, you know, the Exodus didn't happen was that, you know, with the assumed chronology of the Exodus was that, you know, the fall of Canaan happened within the 14th or 13th century, right? But when we look at they dated the actual fall of Jericho, it was in 1573 plus or minus 91 years, right? But when you follow the chronology now, how we have like a 1689 Exodus and you minus the 40 years, because remember they wandered 40 years in the desert, we come to 1649 BC for the fall of Jericho. And this is within the time range of the carbon dating.
2 minutes, Richie, 2 minutes.
Now, let me show you how I got to the conclusion of the that date. Remember I told you about 1904 BC? Where is it?
Extend his time.
It's my time. Good looking, man. I'm trying to rush through this.
All right, how much you need?
Let's give me 5 more minutes.
Okay, you got it.
Give him 10. Take your time.
All right, good. I'm trying to rush through this for the time, but now
Take your time. I'm giving you 10.
My time with this right here.
Yeah.
The Merneptah stele, right? You have a pharaoh in the Bible called Shishak, and we equated that to Shoshank. But when you look at the Bubasite portal, right, there's no mention of Shoshank conquering Israel. That was one of the things that I had to come to face with, right? So we know that the the Hebrew name for Kemet is Mizraim, right? So not all the time can you say, because the way a name is pronounced in the Bible, if it's pronounced similar to Shoshank, it should be Shoshank. Shoshank there's 4 pharaohs mentioned in the Bible. Shoshank and the pharaoh So, those are what you call conjunctural pharaohs, meaning that they're not sure which pharaoh this could be, right? So this is what I've done. I'm like, all right, we got the Merneptah Stele, right? Which is the only mention of Israel in Egypt, right? So this is what I said to myself. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to say that Shishak is Merneptah, right? So what I did was, we know that from the Bible that Solomon built the temple in the 4th year of his reign, right? So we have the 1689 Exodus that I got from before, minus the 440 years that we get from 1 Kings 6:1. And, the Masoretic has 480, but I'm going with the 440, right? So if you start from, let's start from the Merneptah. This is where I started from, the Merneptah Stele, right? We know that this is a exact date right here, 1208 BC. We cannot change that date. I said, all right, if Shishak is Merneptah, right? Because when you look at the biblical narrative of what Shishak did, talking about they came, God used him to judge Israel because of their idolatry. And then you got on the Merneptah Stele that Israel is no more. That's the only instance where you have Egypt reckon Israel, right? So I'm going to start backwards now. We know that in the 1st year reign of Rehoboam, right, was in the 5th year of his reign. That's when Shishak reigned Egypt. So this is how we get the dates now. We go from 1208 BC, add the 5 years, we come to the 1st year reign of Rehoboam, right? And we know that Solomon built the temple in the 4th year of his reign. So we know he ruled for 40 years. So you add 36 years to this date, right? And you come to 1249 BC, right? So how I got to the Exodus was that we know that it says that it came to pass after the 440th year, after the departure of the children of Israel out of Egypt. So we know the Exodus happened 440 years before Solomon built the temple. This is how I got to that 1689, right? So I'm working backwards to my conclusion. And I say, if Shishak is Shoshank, the blue beside portal lack any mention of Israel, the Merneptah Stele reflects the conditions of 1 Kings 14:25. Shishak is mentioned 6 times in the Hebrew Bible and means greedy or fine linen. The similarities in spelling does not mean that they are the same. Misraim is the Hebrew name for Egypt, but the Egyptian name is Kemet. So this is how I got to what you call this date right here, the 1904. So we know that there was 215 years from when there was in Egypt, and that's how I got to the 1904. So when I got to 1904 date now, I looked at what happened in this time period, and that's when I got to the Amenhotep mural. I was like, isn't that ironic? Like, wow, I dated myself back from the Merneptah Stele, and I used the biblical dates, and I ended up to the Amenhotep mural, where you have Asiatics living at peace, coming, with and you look at the multicolored coats, just like remember when Joseph got his multicolored coat from his father. I just found too many similarities, though. But here's the problem with this thing now. Now I'm going to show you now, like I mentioned to you before, like every theory has to be falsified, right? Using this chronology, right, it creates a dark age for the kingdom of Israel. Let me tell you what I mean. If 1249 Solomon built the temple, minus 341 years, now this is the time that's calculated in the Bible from the Kings to the Battle of Megiddo with Necto II, right? That would take us to 908 BC. But the problem is, we know for certain that, especially after the 3rd intermediate period, those dates after that are set in stone. We know that this battle took place in 609 BC, right? That leaves us with 299 years off. If I put back the Exodus and everything back like I did before, we have about 300 years that's going to basically what you call the dark ages of Israel. But we know from the biblical narrative there are no dark ages, because we have all the list of all the kings lined up, the dates where they reigned, not the dates, the time when they reigned, the age where they reigned. The solution is to reduce the time frame of the
5 minutes, Richie. 5 minutes.
The solution is to reduce the time frame of the 3rd intermediate period to 106 years. Right now they have it around 405 years, right? When you look at this, right? When you look at the let me exit this right here. I want to show you this let me just this is my last point right here. Then we could go into my brother's point right here. The conventional history of ancient Near East. Can you guys see this right here? The conventional history of the ancient Near East at large, including Egypt and the Eastern Mediterranean
Expand
basin.
it if you can, Richie.
Let me try to get a little bit bigger here.
There you go.
All right. The conventional history of the ancient Near East at large, including Egypt and Eastern Mediterranean basin, contains several dark ages, poorly documented transitional periods of a certain length. James have argued that the most significant of the dark ages, the transition from the late Bronze to the Iron Age during the last 2 centuries of the second millennium, is largely an artifact of an overly long reconstruction of the Egyptian Third Intermediate period, meaning that they're saying that we have dated the intermediate period of Egypt, the third one, way too long. When you look at the first intermediate period, it was 100 years. The second intermediate period, 100 to maybe the max 200 years. But the third intermediate period, we have about 400 years of uncertainty, right? And what that did was it even created what you call the Greek Dark Ages, where you have 400 years of unknown Greek history. You know why we have 400 years of unknown history in the Greek ages? Because we're trying to find out what happened in these 400 years because we have dated this third intermediate period that long, right? And that is not only the Greek Dark Ages. There's other civilizations that suffer from this because of this long dating, right? So if you basically take the Bible as history, right, what it does is that it gives a correction not only for Egyptian history when it comes to these uncertainty periods, but for Greek history. Because if you reduce the third intermediate period to 100 years, now you have the Odyssey of Homer, the Iliad of Homer. Instead of it being written 400 years after the facts of the Trojan War, it's only 100 years after the Trojan War. So I mean, I have a lot more to go into, but I'm not going to take more time. I'm going to let my brother take the stage. But I hope I didn't go too quick because there's a lot to go into. But I hope I didn't confuse nobody, and I hope to clear it up with the Q&A.
All right,
is that all the time you needed?
Yeah, you got.
I'm feeling quite generous today.
You got 2 minutes and 48 seconds left.
Some implication now. This is the thing that really got to me though. We always thought it was black Egyptians, right, that enslaved the Israelites. When you look at this new chronology that I just showed you, it wasn't the black Egyptians. It was the Asiatic pharaohs that enslaved the Israelites. If you really look at the beef, who did God really have beef with? It was the Canaanites. So you have these Canaanite rulers coming to take over Egypt. They don't know about Joseph because they're from foreign lands, right? They enslaved the Egyptians. You know what I'm saying? They had them built up avarice. And my mind says like, wow, it's not the black Egyptians that God had beef with. It was the Asiatic ones or the Asiatic pharaohs. And you look at it too. This also implies that Solomon was a contemporary with Ramses, right? If you because you talk about the Renepta stele is talking about as Shishak. This makes perfect sense because if you have Solomon after the Bronze Age collapse, right? That's like saying like if I invite you to like an all-white party and you wear in red, you're gonna stand out. So if Solomon happened after the Bronze Age collapse, you should be able to find him during that time period because he should be the only rich nation there because everybody is falling apart, right? But no, you have Solomon as a contemporary with Ramses II, right? And to your point now, why didn't this wasn't mentioned? Why wasn't Richard Solomon mentioned? Everybody was balling in that period before the Bronze Age collapsed. The Macedonians were balling, the Egyptians were balling, and the Israelites were balling too. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the richest person in the world, we don't even know his name. We always think about Bill Gates. So because it's not mentioned that Israel was amongst these rich nations doesn't mean that they wasn't balling either. Everybody was balling before the Bronze Age collapse. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Hey,
that's all I got to say for now.
I'm gonna say this. That's an interesting synopsis. I haven't heard one. MVP might have. I haven't heard that one, but MVP might have. That's definitely. You definitely got my eyebrows raising on that one, bro. Because it would be more in the character of the so-called Asiatic to do such a thing as to what's described in the Bible. I'll say that. So MVP Chris Harris, I'm gonna give you 25, man, since you were so gracious with our brother. And if you need more, of course, you know you got it.
Now I won't need it. Now I won't need it. Hey, will we be doing a rebuttal after this?
If y'all want to do a rebuttal,
yeah, I would like to do a rebuttal, but first I want to make my presentation.
Okay, yeah, y'all can do, because remember, after your presentation, y'all gonna be going back and forth anyway.
Yeah. I think we can say that
for questions from the chat after that.
Is that okay, Richie? Okay, cool. Okay.
All right, time start. When you start, MVP, just keep rocking. I'm gonna step away for a little bit, but I'll be right back.
1 second. I got to get my screen share up.
Okay.
1 second. Don't walk away too fast.
I got you.
Okay. Is my screen share up?
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to hit screen share. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
I got to go to StreamYard and hit the screen share. Excuse me.
I'm still figuring out this screen share on here myself.
Yeah. I use Zoom now. It's just way better. Okay, click on that. And we'll
way easier.
Okay, give me a second. All righty then. Okay, can my screen be seen? Can everything be seen?
You good now?
All right, so we're gonna put the Exodus. We're gonna put the Exodus on trial here again. As always, we are dealing with mythology. We are dealing with people trying to create a narrative for themselves. We're going to be dealing with a lot of anachronisms in the Bible because, once again, the Bible is the authority when dealing with the Exodus. Let's get this thing started here. And my brother said that that it happened sometimes in the 14th dynastic period, which was the Hyksos period. Now, the Hyksos period was a period in the 18th century BCE. Now, Mi'abre Sheshi was a ruler of the areas of Egypt during the second intermediary period. This is the period in when the Hyksos or the Asiatics came into Egypt and peacefully took over. Believe it or not, they took over and they enslaved all the indigenous Egyptians in the north. In the north. Remember, guys, in the south. All right, they enslaved them in the south. Remember, the maps are inverted. But since we're speaking in English terms, it should be okay if I say the north according to today's map. So they enslaved all of them in the north, and you had the indigenous Egyptians that were in the south ruling down below. This is what an intermediary period is. All right, so we had the Hyksos ruling at the time. So Pharaoh Shishi is, in fact, a Hyksos king. Let's read some interesting things about him. Once again, he's around 1797, the 18th century BCE, all the way to the 17th century BCE. This is the consensus on his reign. The people like Kim Ryholt, they don't know when he really lived or not, according to Scarab's Chronology and Interconnections. This is in a book called Egypt, Palestine in the Second Intermediary Period. Okay, so let's continue on. It says the difficulty of the identification is mirrored by problems in determining the events from the end of the Middle Kingdom to the arrival of the Hyksos in Egypt. Nonetheless, Sheshi is, in terms of the number of artifacts attributed to him, the best attested king of the period spanning the end of the Middle Kingdom and the Second Intermediary Period, roughly from 1800 BCE until 1550 BCE. Now, this is not explaining how he lived that long. No, this is saying this time of this so-called Hyksos rule. All right, I want everybody to understand this because we're going to be dealing with dates today. Now, let's continue on. Now, first thing we want to do is we want to get into some anachronisms. Oh my goodness, no. Stop my time. Can my time be stopped? Lord have mercy. Okay, don't worry about it. We're just gonna keep going. So we'll just keep going. It's no problem here. My screen must have jumped. Okay. Now let's just go to the Hebrew prophet Moses. Now this is found in the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Remember, the gentleman said that they left out in the 18th century BCE, but according to the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, which is the extra biblical source, it says that Moses, assuming that he existed, flourished in the 14th, 15th, and 14th century BCE. Now, the Hebrew prophet, teacher, and leader who in the 15th century BCE delivered his people from Egyptian slavery in the covenant ceremony at Mount Sinai where the 10 commandments were promulgated. He founded the religious community known as Israel. As the interpreter of these covenant stipulations, he was the organizer of the community's religious and civil traditions. In the Judaic tradition, he is revered as the greatest prophet and teacher. And Judaism, he has sometimes loosely been called Mosaicism, or the Mosaic faith in Western Christendom. Okay, so I want to make this clear. Moses flourished sometimes in the 14th century BCE. The city of Ramses is mentioned, but the city of Ramses is not built to the 11th century. The 13th century BCE. So this makes absolutely no sense because we're going to get into some history here, and I'm going to show everybody. Now, the first thing we're going to do is deal with the anachronisms or the inconsistencies of the Bible. Now, everybody should know that an anachronism is a story, a place, or thing placed in a timeline that should not be there. Now, when the gentleman sits up there and says that they left out in the 18th century BCE, he's not using the Bible as the authority because according to Exodus 1 and 11, it says that therefore, they did set taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Now, when we get into the city of Ramses, the city of Ramses was built by a 19th dynasty Pharaoh. So that would mean from the time of the Exodus, that from the date he gave, from the date that he gave, it would be, if it was built in the 13th century BCE or 1279 to 1213 BCE, that would be some 441 years later from his supposed time of his date that he gave for the Exodus. It would make no sense because y'all were already gone. You guys weren't even there according to according to your narrative, which is a bit revisionistic in your attempt to elucidate a possible Exodus in the 18th century. You still haven't proven that because the Bible says that you all built the city of Ramses, and the city of Ramses archaeologically is not attested until sometimes during the 13th century BCE. Okay, now regarding the many anachronisms of the Pentateuch, lawyer Joseph Willis, who lived from 1868 to 1950, comments, the first and most obvious proof that the so-called 5 books of Moses were not written by Moses, but date from a time many centuries after his reputed life and death is very simple and indisputable. The proof consists of very numerous instances of what are called the post-Mosaica or after Moses events, related in those books under the name of Moses as their inspired author, events of which Moses, of course, could not have known or written, as they occurred long after his death. These post-Mosaica elements are summarized thus. Several details point to a first millennium date for the book of Exodus. Ezion Geber, one of the station of the Exodus, for example, dates to a period between the 8th and 6th centuries BCE, with possible further occupation into the 4th century BCE. And those place names on the Exodus route which have been identified, Goshen, Pithom, Sukkoth, Ramses, and Kadesh Barnea, point to the geography of the first millennium BCE and not the second millennium BCE. Now, the reason why I'm saying second millennium BCE is because you said 18 in the 14th dynastic period. That is sometimes during the 18th century BCE, so that would make it the second millennium BCE. We're going to find out through further research that a couple of archaeologists have done. They point to the city of Ebion Gezer in the 7th century BCE. Let's continue on. Let's look at some more anachronisms because these need to be identified. Now, in Genesis 26:1, there was famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went unto Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Philistines? How does Abraham and Isaac coexist with the Philistines? Watch. In Genesis 26:1, the Philistines are encountered, but it was not until after 1200 BCE that the Philistines settled on the coastal plain of Canaan. Gerar, a Philistine city, is mentioned in Genesis 20 and verse 1. But excavations show this was just a small village in the Iron Age, sometimes in the 12th century, 12th to 6th century BCE. Exodus 13 and 7. This is what it says. This is in your book. I don't need history or shoehorning to prove it, because your book goes against everything that is said. It says in Exodus 13 and 7, and it came to pass when Pharaoh let the people go that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near, for God said, let's peradventure the people repent when they see war and they return to Egypt. And as we see, the writer of these texts is expressing themes in the 12th century BCE, not the 18th century BCE. Now, let's go back up. I want to show somebody something else. I got some more here, right here. Okay. Now, I want to go to Anachronisms continue. Now, the problem with the book of the Bible period, or with this Exodus story, is the Edomites. This is a smoking gun, because the Edomites, let's read, they don't really appear until later, after Moses. Nobody truly knows why the Edomites were mentioned or demonized as much as they were in the book, but we do know that they were a later settlement. Most people say that they were a 7th century BCE settlement, but we know they were not a 18th century BCE settlement. They didn't exist yet. Let's read here. Another biblical anachronism occurs when the Israelites are depicted as negotiating with the king of Edom to cross his land. This is in Numbers in 20 and 14. You all know the book. Now, although the name Edom appears in the Ugaritic correct epic, or the correct text, or the Ugaritic text in the 15th century BCE as Udum or Udumu, because remember, we're dealing with an English text here, there evidently existed no kingdom in Edom before the time of the Assyrians in the 7th century BCE. Moreover, the kingdom was short-lived, destroyed by the Babylonians in the next century, which would indicate that this part of the Exodus tale was cobbled together during that period, which is in the time of Hezekiah, Josiah, and the Babylonian exile. Now, I don't believe Josiah ever existed, but that's neither here nor there. We know this story was compiled in the time of the Babylonians going towards the Persian period because of the geographical locations that are being mentioned. Say, for instance, if I'm writing a story and what I'm going to be expressing is the geography in my surroundings. I'm going to be expressing what I see on TV, such as LeBron James being the greatest player of all time. I'm not going to be living in 2021 talking about, yeah, I saw Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dunk a basketball yesterday on TV. No, that's called an anachronism. I'm placing something in a timeline that doesn't belong there. And that's the problem with the biblical text. It doesn't give you a chronology at all. Now we know the story of the holy genocide in Numbers 31, where Moses commands all the women and children to be killed. Fortunately for the Midianites, the Bible account could not have happened, as the area of Midian was not settled in any significant way until the 8th to 7th centuries BCE, leaving us with yet another anachronism. Hence, Moses' alleged error, there could not have been such numbers amassed in a kingdom for the Israelites to have slaughtered. This revolting account is, again, simply one of the most outrageous of the many in the Old Testament, in which the chosen people are depicted as repeatedly as slaughtering and pillaging their way around the region for decades and centuries. All right, so as you can see, this account or any therein can't be taken seriously, especially since most of these events occur after your so-called date of the Exodus. Moving forward here, I want to end it, because I told you this was going to be short and sweet. Let's finish up here. Okay, here we go. Now it says, moreover, the Septuagint rendering of Genesis 46 and 29 includes an anachronism by changing the location of Jacob in Egypt from Goshen to Hierapolis, where Jacob's 11th son, Joseph, purportedly went to meet his father. Now, as we know, Hierapolis or Pithom did not exist at the time when Jacob traditionally was in Egypt, but it was an important trading station at the time the Septuagint was composed in the 3rd and 2nd century BCE. That's a dagger. In this regard, reference states that the biblical names of Pithom and Ramses date from the Satic period, which is the 7th and 6th century BCE. Hence, they could not have been part of the tradition from the 2nd millennium, which you mentioned. Indeed, Pithom may have been included because of its popularity among the Greeks in Romans of the apparent time of the biblical passages, these biblical passages composition. Now, during the 7th to the possibly 3rd centuries BCE, this is when the Bible was purportedly put together. Now, the city's proximity to the Red Sea gives the Exodus tale legitimacy, possibly explaining its inclusion in the story. All right, let's continue on. I want to get ready to end this thing here. And one more time. It says right here in the book, in the Bible again, that the Canaanites and the Philistines were there, especially the Philistines. Now, we know the Philistines don't get there until the 12th century BCE. Now, if Moses and Abraham are encountering Philistines, that means you all weren't, if Abraham is encountering Philistines, that means your birth is sometimes after the 11th century BCE, supposedly during the time of Jacob's birth or sojourn on this earth. Because Abraham is encountering Philistines in the land of Canaan. They were not there. They didn't exist yet in the 2nd millennium BCE. They weren't even there, bro. Archaeologically, they don't get there to the 12th century BCE. Continuing. I want to go here again in the book of Numbers. It gives us a list of sites. Once again, it tells us the places that you all were at, as mainly Kadus, Ezion Geber, on the Israeli side of the border between Israel and Jordan, just outside of Eilat. Both sites have been investigated archaeologically and found to have been founded during the ancient Near Eastern Late Iron Age, no earlier than the 7th, 8th century BCE. Now, once again, a lot of my sources come from the Cambridge, Oxford Encyclopedia of History and Israel Finkelstein's excellent work, The Bible Unearthed. All right, let's continue on. I want to deal with another historical inconsistency or inaccuracy. I think I mentioned this one right here. Yeah, but I do want to read this. Numbers 33 and 35, they journeyed from Abanona to and encamped in Ezion Geber. Now, Ezion Geber is another place reported to be a camping place of the children of Israel. It is mentioned in other places in the Bible as a later port town on the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba, and it has led to its identification by archaeologists at a mound located in the modern border between Israel and Jordan, halfway between the towns of Eilat and Aqaba. Excavations here in the years 1938 and 1940 revealed impressive Iron Age remains, but no trace whatsoever of a late Bronze Age occupation. That would be any time from the 18th century BCE all the way to the 1st millennium BCE. They don't see it, bro. They don't see it there. Now, from the long list of encampments in the wilderness, Kadesh Barnea, Ezion Geber are the only ones that can safely be identified, yet they revealed no trace of wandering Israelites. This is on page 63 of Israel Finkelstein's work, The Bible Unearthed. Now, just to give you all a case here, I might have misrepresented those dates, excuse me, but the Bronze Age is any times from the 3rd millennium BCE to the 12th century BCE, and the Iron Age would be any time between the 12th century BCE to the 1st millennium BCE. And remember, you have Iron Age 1, 2, and I think 3. Let's continue on. I want to show that he can't escape from this because Yahweh is the one mentioning the Philistines here. So either your book is godly inspired, this is the book of God, or somebody else wrote it, which I believe somebody wrote it. And it says, Exodus 23 and 31, and I will set thy bounds from the Red Sea, even unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the desert unto the river, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and thou shalt drive them out before thee. Who was them? The Philistines. The Philistines don't get there into the 12th century BCE, my friend, so you can't escape this. You can't escape that one. Joshua 13 and 3. It says right here, from Sihor, which is before Egypt, even unto the borders of Ekron northward, which is counted to the Canaanite, 5 lords of the Philistines. So they are fighting kings or masters of the Philistines, my friend. So once again, as you guys see, I have written, once again, the Philistines are being mentioned. How could this be in the 18th century BCE, as what you have mentioned, my friend? I wanna get down to business here. Now, I pulled this from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a secondary source, and it says the first known records of the Philistines are inscriptions and reliefs in the mortuary temple of Ramses III at Medinat Habu, where they appear under the name PRST as one of the sea peoples that invaded Egypt about 1190 BCE after ravaging Anatolia, Cyprus, and Syria. Oh yeah, by the way, they were the Danites. Let's keep on moving. Anatolia, Cyprus, and Syria. After being repulsed by the Egyptians, they settled, possibly with Egypt's permission, on the coastal plain of Palestine from Joppa, southward to Gaza. Southward to Gaza. The area contained 5 cities of the Philistine Confederacy: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, and Ekron, and was known as Philistia, or the land of the Philistines. It was from the designation that the whole of the country was later called Palestine by the Greeks. Simple as that. I don't think I want to read all of this about the Battle of Megiddo. I don't think that it's needed or anything like that. But I do want to in that ancient mass grave sites, archaeology found child slaves of biblical Egypt. That would be in my rebuttal. So with that being said, I hope I've raised a lot of questions about your supposed sojourn in the wilderness, about your Exodus. It's going to be hard for you to escape those biblical verses there, because archaeology shows that they weren't there into the 12th century BCE. Most of those sites that you all supposedly had visited are in fact in the 7th century BCE, 6th century BCE, and a lot of the redaction that we find in your Bible, or the writings in your Bible, supposedly come during after the Babylonian period. The reason why I tell people that Josiah did not exist, he's just a king being expressed to enhance the monotheism that was inside of Israel at the time. So he did not exist. I do accept Hezekiah, but I don't accept him as this great king that existed. Now, these things have nothing to do with the Exodus. I'm just giving transparency here to some information that I brought forth. So with that being said, either you're going to have to explain away the biblical text, because you said that it was the authority, and all of the information that you have brought forth do not line up with the biblical text at all. And I have much, much more, but I think my time has come to an end here. So with that being said, thank you, Brother Pianki.
You actually got a little over 4 minutes if you want to take it.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Both of these brothers coming with some powerful information, coming with some fire. We got Richie Garfield in the building. We got the one and only MVP Chris Harris in the building. So get them likes up, share the show. Richie, it's on you, brother. You want to rebuff anything our brother said, because he definitely coming for you when he get his turn to rebuttal.
Yes, I want to talk about the anachronism he spoke about. I kind of did touch that in my
real quick. MVP. How long y'all want for the rebuttal? Because what did I say? 5 minutes? I think maybe 10 to be more sufficient.
Yeah, I think 10 minutes would be enough. I think 10 minutes would be enough here. I think 10 minutes is enough here. Yeah, that's fine. What about you, Richie? What you think? Because he's asking.
10 is good. 10 is good.
Okay. All right. Time to start when you start, Richie. My fault. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, so those anachronisms.
All 3 brothers is easy to look at. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, it be like that, man.
Yeah.
All right, so the name for New York, right, used to be New Amsterdam, the old name. So if I'm writing something today about if I had an ancestor in New York, and I'd be like, my ancestor when they moved to New York, right? If I mention it as New York because I'm in New York writing about the period, am I wrong? No, because I'm relating it to the period I'm in. But it was known as New Amsterdam to my ancestors. The city of P. Ramses, when it's mentioned in the Bible, is an indication that now like I mentioned before, that this new chronology puts Solomon as a contemporary of Ramses II. So that means that in their kingdom mode, when they had about 80 to 120 years as a United Kingdom, Saul, David, and Solomon, this is the time period for you to get your books and everything correct. Because at the time of the Exodus, where I proposed in the 13th and 14th dynastic periods, you had the thing called the Proto-Sinaitic script that just came about, which is basically the invention of the alphabet. So the stuff that Moses wrote down, like, when he went to the mountain, is not the exact Bible we have, because the Bible we have is a compilation of other books. Like when you go to college and stuff like that, you have to do what you call APA references, right? And the Bible is good at that. Wasn't this written down in the Wars of the Lord? Wasn't this written down in this book? So it goes to show you that scribes had other Hebrew books getting the narrative down to kind of summarize it into the Bible we have today. So when you look at Exodus, what was that scripture? Exodus 12:11 mentioned P. Ramses, right? Guess what also mentioned P. the lands of Ramses? Genesis 47:11, right? And this is what it says in Genesis 47:11. It says, and Joseph placed his father and his brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best land, in the lands of Ramses. So, talking about Joseph now, right? If, according to the Zondervan Bible dates that you gave about, if the Exodus happened in the time of the New Kingdom, either Ramses or Moses III, right? And that's when they built, the city of Ramses. Why are you mentioning Ramses with Joseph? You understand what I'm saying? And it goes to show you that this was written in the time when Ramses, the kingdom, existed. So the land that their ancestors were in was Avaris. And that was the city that was built under P. Ramses. So when you look at all the lining up of the things I did when it comes to, when you look at the period of the 13th and 14th dynastic periods, you have a prolonged famine. You have the Ipuru papyrus that explains exactly the same thing that's in Exodus with the plagues, same similarities. You have an increase of male Asiatic females over the male population, right? You have the timeline I gave you from the 215 years from the Exodus into when Jacob arrived into the promise of Abraham. All those line up with the archaeology. All those line up with the time period. So I didn't change the biblical narrative. The Bible doesn't says, the Exodus happened at this time in this year when the stars were, astrochronology. That didn't happen then. It says it happened. It tells you the things that happened in the time period. So when you look at the events, right, I mentioned the events of the Bible with the events of the 13th or 14th dynastic period, all right? So when it comes to when you mentioned the Philistine Sioux, I actually had never researched that deep into that issue right there, where you mentioned the Philistine being only mentioned in the 6th century. But I'm going to assume that it's going to be kind of the same thing, that when they're writing the Bible down, they're writing it in the time period when that land existed, when it was named that land. So, but that doesn't, change the fact that, if you want to put it this way, if you look at the biblical narrative, right, and the things that happen in the 13th and 14th dynasties, right, why are they so similar? Without even trying to shoehorn it in now, why do you have, a Hebrew man at the tomb of Amenhotep with a Hebrew name, and it lines up with the timeline too, right? Why do you have when the timeline comes to the fall of Canaan, why does it fall exactly in the 15th century BC? And now after the land of Canaan, you have the time of the judges, right? Why all of a sudden you have these things called the Amarna letters talking about, help us, man, we're getting wrecked out here from these Haburu, right? And now you come into the time of Solomon now, the times of Ramses and everything, time of prosperity. Everybody was balling during that time period. Every nation was balling. And the Bible mentions during the time of Solomon that Israel was very rich too, right? And isn't it ironic, right? If you look at this new narrative now, this new timeline, that with the fall of Solomon came the fall of the Bronze Age period where everybody was getting wrecked. Like for some reason, that Israel was kind of like the timeline for the world at that time period. And also you have the Merneptah stele mentioned in Israel, right? And it falls exactly with the time when, you got the Shishak in the Bible going out there to almost wreck Israel, but, basically God had mercy on them. And he only took the gold from the temple. But now what happened now, during that time period, the Bible says it too, that Israel became a tributary to Egypt. And this
4
is
minutes, Richie. 4 minutes.
4 minutes. And this is what the Merneptah Stele says, that basically, they, talk about not just Israel, it was all these other nations out there they talked about. And now you have them talking about Israel, their seed is no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, basically, we took care of that because, you don't have to worry about them. We knew that there was a contemporary with us, when Solomon was, king of Israel. Israel was a prosperous nation. After Solomon, Israel wasn't the nation it used to be no more. It was a divided nation. You had the northern kingdom in the north and the southern kingdom of Judah in the south. And it was always getting wrecked. And that goes exactly in the line from the fall of the Bronze Age period until the fall of Jerusalem. So to your question now, when it comes to why are P. Ramses mentioned in the Bible when, Moses wasn't in there, because guess what? They built Avaris. That's the answer to that right there.
All right. So you got 3 minutes left. You want to concede that, or you want to keep going?
Oh, I thought you said I had 1 minute left.
No, that was you had 4 minutes. 4 minutes. My bad.
I got 4 minutes left.
Well, you got two, just under 3 minutes now.
Okay.
But when I first said it, you had 4 minutes.
All right. Cool. Here you have the similarity between the Ipuru papyrus and the Torah.
Expand it a little bit.
Let me get it bigger. The plague of blood right here. And this is dated to the 13th and 14th dynasties. Here you have Hebrew slaves' names on the Brooklyn papyrus.
Hey, excuse me, Brother Bianchi, you can give him a little bit more time. He can take all the time that he needs. I want to go use the little boy's room for a minute. Is that okay?
Gotcha.
I'm listening to you, Richie Garfield, on my phone. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's a good one too. The strontium isotope analysis for human remains. This is what shows us that there was an increase in the female population, Asiatic, not just any female population, the Asiatic population in the time of the 13th and 14th dynasties, right? So now you have to give a theory now. What could cause this explanation? What is your narrative that explains why there were more Asiatic females in this time period, right? What's your narrative? My narrative is that, not my narrative, the biblical narrative is that Pharaoh took the males and drowned them in the Nile, right? So if I take that narrative and say, all right, that's your narrative, where's your evidence? I'm showing you evidence right here. So it's not about shoehorning. This is not what you call what's they call that when you try to always fit something into your belief system. It's a logical fallacy, they call it. Like I can't find a name right now, but this is not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to change history. I'm not trying to change science. I'm taking what is, plugging it into the Bible. They fit all of a sudden. Here we have the diagram of the Bible. If the Bible was so made up, right? I never seen so much fiction go into so much detail to give you the time of when a king reigned, when he died. He reigned at this age. Only nations do that. We see it in Egypt. We see it in Mesopotamia. It means you have to go through a lot. You have to basically just sit there and be bored. I'm going to make up the history of a nation and go through all this work to tell you when this person died, when he reigned at the age of this and that. That's amazing to me to make up all that. Here we have the Martyr letters that now, if you have the Exodus occurring, at the end of the 14th dynasty, it brings a martyr period now to the time of the judges, where you have the Hebrew basically, being blamed about causing wreck in Canaan. Ain't the book of Judges all about that? Making wreck out, making all kind of ruckus out there. Here you have the statue of an Asiatic man from Avaris, basically. And basically, this is a man, right, that was built, an Egyptian tomb was built for an Asiatic man, right? So if I say, okay, where's the evidence of a man like Joseph in Egypt? An Asiatic man named like Joseph in Egypt? Egypt should have some evidence of some Asiatic dignitary in there that was so important that they will build him a tomb. right? Here you have it right here. You know, this is simulation of the tomb. And here's the tomb right here. I don't know if you guys can see it. This is a recreation.
Expand your screen a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. This was found in Varus, right? Well, like, what's? I'm going to ask you guys now. What's your narrative to explain this right now? What's your narrative if it's not the biblical narrative? That's nothing for you guys. Like I said, pharaohs of the Bible. The conjectural pharaohs of Shishak and So. So basically,
expand your screen again. Expand your screen again.
Oh, is that small? Dang. Hold on.
There you go.
All right. Here you have, Shishak.
I'm back.
Yeah. So if you're gonna want to put Shoshank as Shishak, right? There's so much scholarship that says that these two pharaohs are they're conjectural. But these other pharaohs, Takara and Neko, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, these are pharaohs that are known. If you look at it, right, when you look at the dating of after the third intermediate period, there's so much certainty in those dates. You have these things called astrochronology in the Babylonian period, whereas that, you have this king talking about a certain star alignment. If you have this program called Stellarium, right, you could go back and see that the stars are clockwork. It's like God's clock. Right, so we are certain of this time period when it comes to the dates, and you also have certainty of pharaohs' names. But right here, when you look at the time of if you're looking at the time of Ramses and the time of the New Kingdom, if you have the Bible we have today being written down today, and you're talking about pharaohs that happened in the 14th dynasty. Of course, you're basically going to just know that it was Pharaoh because your ancestors told you the story. They gave you the initial writings, and now you're basically, writing it down into the Bible we have today. But when Israel is a kingdom, as Israel is as established kingdom now, and you have the divided kingdom, you're going to have more scholarship now to have these pharaohs' names being written into the later texts. That basically it shows that when this Second Kings and Isaiah was written, it's probably written more concurrent with the time period. Whereas basically when the Exodus was written in the form we have today, it was written in the time of the Hebrew monarchy during the times of Ramses. Yep.
All right. MVP, it's on you.
All right. This is actually kind of easy because I see a lot of shoehorning going on here. I see a lot of religious pontification also. And the first thing I want to do is start off with one of his arguments is it seems that he's reaching because he mentions the Merneptah stele. But Merneptah was actually a king that existed sometimes in the 13th century BCE. So Merneptah has nothing to do with the Exodus narrative at all, especially if you came out in the 18th century BCE. And if you guys had established a kingdom under David and Solomon, as you have said, and not to mention that you said that there was a temple that that you guys are dating it back to, then you would have to show me the archaeological evidence to prove that, or the stratigraphical evidence to prove that. You just can't use revisionist theorem to try to prove the Exodus. Now, the problem with the biblical narrative is that you are in fact shackled to the narrative of Moses writing the Bible. You're shackled to that fact that you have to prove that Moses existed first. You can't go off and sit up there and say that there was Proto-Sinaitic that existed, which is a 12th century BCE text, not to mention a Canaanite text, sir. So once again, that's a hell of a reach for you to use. It seems you're trying to compile a period of 18, 17, 16, 14, 13, 12, 550-year narrative to fit in a narrative in the 18th century BCE. Let's pay attention a little bit more. You mentioned that Solomon and Ramses the First was in fact congruent with each other when no Egyptian king ever mentioned Solomon. As a matter of fact, if there were, one second, don't come in. As a matter of fact, if Solomon existed sometimes and had this huge kingdom where all the kings came to him and asked him for knowledge, that would have been a direct threat to the 19th dynastic kings who owned the land of retinue, or so-called Canaan, because the Egyptians were in control of the land at that time. Now, how can you sit up there and say that Ramses, being a 19th dynastic king, one of the greatest kings at that of all time in Egypt, how can you sit up there and say he is somewhat concurrent with that of Solomon when David, according to the Christian theology, is not born until the first millennium BCE? So it sounds as if you're using David Rowe's revisions theorem or patterns of the Exodus narrative in order to prove this. Here's the problem that you're having. If you're going to say that you all came out in the 18th period, you would have to show me the original writings. But you showed me the Harris Papyrus, and the Harris Papyrus is a 12th century BCE writing. And just because it mentions, check this out, just because it mentions what we see to be called Asiatic names or Hebrew names, that is once again a shoehorn, because Amorite peoples, they commonly had those names. As a matter of fact, one of the 14th dynastic kings, one of the Hyksos kings, his name was Jacob Baal, or Yakub Baal, because we know J did not exist yet. You see what I'm saying? So when you're using the revisionist theorem, you're actually mixing everything up. I'm going to give you another example. You brought up the Merneptah stele. How could Merneptah defeat the Israelites when they were under the sovereignty of Yahweh at this time? And then, so that has nothing to do with this. And as a matter of fact, that is another argument of its own, because that does not say Israel at all. It was interpreted as Israel by a Christian, and actually he got it wrong. Merneptah never warred with a group of people called the Israelites. As a matter of fact, he brought home the people, those Amu people or those Asiatics. He captured them and brought them right back into Egypt as slaves. He warred there and won, and he warred in the north. He did not war in the south where you guys were supposedly at in the land of Canaan. He went into the north. You have to understand the geographical location before you make a claim like that. And that's something that most Israelites fail to do. He was in the north towards where? Megiddo, the highlands, the highland plains. He was not in the lowlands of Judea where you all were at the after you all crossed the sea. So like I said, this is a lot of revisionist theorem. Here, I want to bring something else up. When you mention the Temple of Solomon, there is no archaeological evidence to prove that Solomon's temple ever existed. You first have to show me the archaeological evidence to prove Solomon's temple existed in order for you to get that date. Other than that, it's strictly that of a religious text. And you cannot sit up there and use that as evidence, especially if you're going against the biblical narrative by trying to use revisionist theorem to prove the Exodus happened. That doesn't make any sense when you said that Solomon and Ramses are contemporary with each other, because Solomon would be somewhat of a 9th century king, or a mid-9th century king. That's what that would make him, because David ruled for 45 years. So that would probably place him around 945 BCE. That would probably place Solomon's reign for how long? He ruled for how long? 35 years, 40 years? That would place him from 45 to 901 BCE. Yet Ramses never mentions him. No king ever mentions him. Another problem that we have with that is that Solomon married the Pharaoh's daughter, another unknown Pharaoh here. What Pharaoh was it? See, if the Bible just gives us a name contemporary with these so-called Israelite kings, we could do some real work here. We could do some real research, and we could see, okay, what kings are contemporary with which. Now, it's constantly mentioning Ramses' names here. Ramses' name don't come around until the 13th century BCE. How can you say that they were gone in the 18th century BCE without first correlating the date of Ramses' name? The example that you gave was, once again, a shoehorn tactic. We'll say if, New York or Detroit. No, the bottom line is you are shackled. You are shackled. You are a handcuff to the Bible, and you must say Moses wrote it because the Bible says he wrote it. You can't do away with it, because if you do away with the fact that Moses wrote the book is no good, period. Now it's just one big inconclusive mythological tale that expresses a narrative of being chosen and not being chosen. I want to talk about something else, how you hijack that word, Habiru. Now, Hebrew or Eber mean one who's crossed over. Habiru means
3 minutes, MVP. 3 minutes.
Thank you. I won't need much more time. Now, the word Habiru actually means dusty and dirty. So the Egyptians saw these Asiatic pastoralists as somebody that was dusty and dirty, and they had no civilization because they were always wandering around with their cattle and their flocks. So sometimes after the Babylonian captivity, when this narrative was composed, they begin to use Egypt as a backdrop because it was probably still a powerful nation at the time. And if we're talking about during the 7th century BCE, we're talking about that Nubian dynasty that came in here, the mid 7th century BCE. We're talking about the Nubian dynasty that probably came in here and cleared all that nonsense on up. It's just that simple. You're doing a lot of shoehorning. You have not made the Exodus a reality. In fact, you're raising questions yourself, and you're begging the question when you say, these people are Habirus, maybe. This lines up with this. No, you're using an Egyptian narrative and an African narrative to express what's in your book. And the stories that they learned in Egypt, when these Asiatic people came in there, was their inspiration to write them a text for their people, because they seen how the narratives of the tale of Senhui, the tale of Heru-Beodet, the story of Asar or Set, the story of Set himself, and all the other ancient deities put a hold on their people, and inspired their people to love their country, and they wanted the same thing for their people. Beloved Richie Garfield, you are wrong. You have not proven the Exodus. The Exodus is still a myth, and that is time.
Shout out to both of these brothers, MVP. You killing me, dude. So with that being said, Richie, you want to respond?
Oh, definitely. Because I just realized he wasn't arguing against me. He's arguing against an old theory still. I bought a new theory, right? And he's still basically bringing David back to the 9th century. I'm like, no, David does not belong in the 9th century anymore.
Well, I thought we were going into a Q&A period. I thought we were going to go into the Q&A period.
Oh, I thought
is it going to be a rebuttal
one more time, and then we're okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
If we want to do another rebuttal, we can do that, but then I won't do a Q&A.
Gotcha.
So okay, Q&A or the rebuttal?
Let's jump into the Q&A.
So I asked a question to him, or he asked a question to me.
You can go ahead and start, Rich.
Okay. So yeah, you keep putting David back into the 9th century, right? And
first millennium BCE.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm basically showing a new timeline based on the Egyptian narratives, the archaeological evidence, the scientific evidence, right, to the biblical narrative, right? I also mentioned that this third intermediate period is where the issue lays. So everything that you only feel you have against me is not basically by bringing me back to the old theory. It's by basically saying that for us to accept.
What's your question?
See, my question is, when it comes to addressing the evidence of the female Asiatics in Avaris that was higher, what's your explanation for that?
What's your timeline for that?
That's in the fourth. If you listen to what I was saying in my presentation, which probably shows you didn't listen to me, which was the 13th and 14th dynasty. I mentioned that.
So that would be the 18th. I listened to you because I addressed the 18th century BCE. Well, when you see Asiatics in Egypt at this time, they're there because of the Hyksos, rule.
No. My question is, how do you explain the increase of female Asiatics over the male Asiatics in that time period?
It's non sequitur to the debate. It has nothing to do with it. This is about proving the Exodus. You asking me a question about them being more women versus being Asiatic women than women has nothing to do with this debate. Has nothing to do with it at all.
How come?
You have to give more inference to your question because it's
my inference is because I'm saying that when you line up the biblical narrative like I did before with all the dates, I didn't change no dates in the Bible. I didn't change Egyptian archaeological evidence. I lined it up, and it lines up to the time period of the Exodus where you have a higher increase of female Asiatics.
Hold on, hey, hold on, 1 second, brother. Hey, let's just get the dialogue going because he's not asking questions. He seems to want a dialogue on through. So, is that okay, brother Pianki? Is that okay? Let's just because he's
as long as it's okay with both of y'all.
Yeah. I mean, do you just want a dialogue? Okay,
I mean, like,
once again, I wanna interject for a minute because you keep on saying you did not change the timeline. Once again, you did not support the biblical timeline either, because the biblical timeline is given a time of the 12th century in some stories, it's given a timeline of the 7th century in most, it's given a timeline of the 6th century in most, and it's given another
according to who, though? According to who? Also, according to the Bible?
According to the Bible and archaeological excavation done in that area. The Philistines don't get there until the 12th century BCE. If Abraham existed, why is he encountering Philistine kings when they don't get there to the 12th century BCE? That means the Israelites weren't even there. They weren't even alive in the 18th century BCE because Abraham is warring with Philistine kings in the 12th century BCE. You're not accounting for the biblical narrative. You're creating a new narrative, sir.
So
that's why I'm interjecting on you.
So you're talking about the Philistines or the Egyptians?
I'm talking about the Philistines. I said Philistines.
So I could say this actually had nothing to do with the debate because we came to talk about the biblical.
It has everything to do with the debate because you said the biblical narrative was the authority.
No. We're talking about we said the biblical narrative about ancient Egypt and slaves in Egypt.
Listen, the Bible cannot explain the chronology. Hold on. The Bible cannot explain the chronology of Egypt because it never mentions a date or a king. It mentions the city of Ramses, but it never mentions Ramses himself. So you cannot have a proper timeline for a city or a group of people that are over 9,000 years old. Estimated. The Bible cannot give a proper timeline because, first of all, it's a religious text, not a historical text.
Okay, so the timeline I presented in my presentation with the 415 years from Abraham, right? I pinpointed that to the tomb of Amenhotep, right? Where you have Asiatic men with, striped clothes, just like Joseph wore in Genesis. You follow 215 years, you get to the 14th and 13th dynasties, right? All that stuff and all these events line up directly. There's no shoehorning in, right?
Well, history calls those people the Amu people. When we add a Latin suffix to the Amu people, we get Amuite people or Amorite people. Ezekiel 16:1 clearly says you guys were Amorite peoples. Deuteronomy 26:7 clearly says that you guys were Amorite peoples. So there was really no Israelites. This was just a group of people that came around sometimes in the 6th century BCE to form a confederate for themselves. Once again, you lining up a timeline, you would first show me you're starting in the Bible. You would have to start somewhere historical and give me archaeological evidence in which we can date backwards because your timeline is all over the place. Once again, you mentioned the Harris Papyrus, you mentioned the Merneptah Stela, and you keep mentioning the Hyksos rule. How do you encompass 800 years of history between the 14th dynastic period all the way, 500 years of history between the 14th dynastic period, which was not a dynasty, by the way. It was a rule. It was a bunch of foreigners who invaded ancient Kemet or Mary. They were invaders who took over illegally at that, burning down our temples, enslaving our men, women, and children. Okay, let me continue on. You don't have a timeline that you can start from in the Bible. The Bible starts at Solomon's temple for a timeline. You would have to prove Solomon's temple existed, but yet you said Solomon existed contemporaneously with Ramses. So that would make Solomon in the 13th century BCE, but Christian contemporary historians all say that David existed in the first millennium.
And that's what you're doing. Basically, you're lining me up with Christian. You're not even talking about the Bible. You're talking about Christian historians. Now, Christian historians and the Bible are two different things. Christian historians, we all have theories about what the Bible says. The Bible.
What you're giving us is a theory, brother.
Let him respond, Chris. Let him respond.
No, it is a theory, definitely. But you say I'm all over the place, right? I basically said, all right, Shishak, right? We got Pharaoh Shishak, who basically came to conquer Israel during the time of Rehoboam, which is Solomon's son, right? in the 4th year of Rehoboam, right? So I'm taking the Meneptah Stele, right, as the event of Shishak, right? So that's just biblical Shishak. Meneptah is a biblical Shishak. That's my claim right there, right?
Okay.
I'm dating backwards of all the dates that the Bible will give us, right?
Okay.
And this is how I land at the Amarna tablets during the time of Canaan. This is how I landed at basically the fall of Jericho in the 15th century BC. This is how I landed at the Exodus in the 14th century BC. This is how I landed at the coming up mural in 1904 in the 19th century BC. I didn't shoehorn it. I'm not all over the place. I basically used the biblical times given, and it
the
fits
biblical timeline, exactly.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is, when did Shishak exist?
Shishak. Which one? The biblical?
Shishak,
the biblical one?
When did he not see? Now we're back on the biblical Shishak. I'm asking you, what is the contemporary evidence to show what is his timeline contemporaneously? What is his timeline?
So we remember when you have the Bible, right?
I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm talking about scholastically. What is Shishak's timeline? Shishak doesn't matter.
Okay, so we hear what I said. I'm saying Shishak is Meneptah. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, Merneptah is the 12th century BCE.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I never doubted that.
So you're switching the pharaohs around. You're switching them up. You're switching the timeline.
No, I'm not.
The Bible does not mention Merneptah.
I'm presenting a new theory. Thank you.
You're presenting a new theory.
But
it's not proven.
Listen to what I'm saying. I am not changing the Bible. What I'm saying is that Shishak was thought to be Shoshenq, the pharaoh Shoshenq, right? In Egyptian chronology, right? I'm saying that that's a conjecture. Shishak doesn't have to be Shoshenq because of similarities of spelling. What I'm saying is that because of the Meneptah Stele, right, which mentions him going into Israel, laying him waste them one. To your point, you're saying that's debatable, but guess what? Majority of scholarship agrees that the Meneptah Stele mentions Israel, right?
No, the majority of scholarship does not say that. As a matter of fact, there's new information that is now coming forth because it says Israarrir. That does not say Israel. And remember, when you're reading something, you
got to provide that evidence.
One moment, I'm going to bring it home.
Yeah.
You're using somewhat David Roll's theorem. Now, when you read the Merneptah Stela, all of a sudden you guys read that Irraar, where it says you guys supposedly say Israel, but every other part of that narrative is read from right to left. But when y'all get there, y'all read it left to right. But if you really read it, it says the place where Ra sowed his seed. If you read it the reverse, as it's supposed to be read. So you can't take one part of David Roll's theory and apply it to yourself. But then when we get to the Merneptah Stele, all of a sudden y'all start changing it all up. You would have to prove that Merneptah, who warred in the north, which would be the place of Israel, by the way, the home of Israel, Omri's kingdom, you would first have to show me if this was in the first millennium BCE, as it says, or the 12th century BCE. You would have to show me Merneptah destroying an Israelite kingdom. It does not say that in your Bible. It never says that. It never says the northern kingdom capitulated to any king. That's what he wore.
The Bible's biblical narrative never said he destroyed it. It says that he went there to destroy it, but they prayed to God.
Merneptah's name is not mentioned in the Bible.
It doesn't have to be. Like other.
Oh my God! Come on, man.
Let him break it. Let him break it down, Chris. Go ahead.
We know that it was an Egyptian king, right? So remember, we're talking about Israelite history. We're talking about Egyptian king. We have to measure the king by his actions. Which actions measure in history from the biblical narrative? That's what you have to look at. Which action of the Bible? But remember, if you're going to have a bias with the Bible, right? You're going to say, you know what? Even if that fits, I'm not going to believe it. You know what I'm saying? If you already have that bias towards it. So which action of the Bible, biblical Shishak, which it's called, matches an Egyptian pharaoh? And the only thing that we could see in Egyptian chronology and history is a Meneptah Stele, Pharaoh Meneptah. Basically, him. Like I said, you're saying that it doesn't mention Israel. That's still what you call a minority view. The majority view is that it mentioned Israel. Even dubbed it Israel Stele. It's still called that. You know what I'm saying?
Go ahead, Chris.
All right, the Bible mentions Shushan, right? Or
Shishak.
Shishak, or whatever anybody wants to call him. Are we talking about Shishak the first, Shishak the second? Are we talking about the 22nd dynastic king? Which one are we talking about here? Because it seems like you're making
Shishak. It's
okay,
mentioned the name
Shishak.
Shishak. Yeah.
Okay,
You
but
also
the
mentioned. Remember, we
name,
have a pharaoh
but
named.
the name. Can you show me that? Now? Let's pull that up in the Bible. Let's get right down to it, and I need you to show me how you transform that name to Merneptah, because and show me
All right.
Merneptah. Hold on, show me Merneptah warring in the south. He warred in the north. According to the biblical narrative, you guys were still in the south. You guys hadn't even established the two kingdoms yet.
What are you talking about? But hold
It doesn't even make any sense.
Wait a minute. What are you talking
The
about?
timeline is all messed
Hold on.
up.
If Shishak, you're talking about the son of Solomon. That's already united kingdom you're talking about right there. So we do have the north and south.
Hold on.
By that time.
One more time. You would have to first. It says he sacked the kingdom of Jerusalem, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it says in the Bible. Is that a true narrative?
You're talking about the Shishak narrative.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's a true narrative.
He came up against.
Where is the temple? Can I have some archaeological evidence to prove this temple exists?
Let him answer. Go ahead, Rich.
So what's your question? You want evidence of the temple?
Can
now?
I have evidence of Solomon's temple and the archaeological excavation to go along with it to prove your theory? Because the Bible mentions 400 something odd years to the time of the Exodus. So in order to confirm that, you would need the archaeological excavation to prove that. So if you have the archaeological data, can I please have that in the person that conducted the archaeological excavation?
Of Solomon's temple so Solomon's temple, the one that was destroyed by the Babylonians, right, was rebuilt, and then it was reconstructed by Herod, and that was destroyed by the Romans, right? And there's a Temple Mount out in Jerusalem that they're fighting over. So
one more time. I don't think you understood my question. Okay.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Like, now
I'm asking you. You're just
hold on.
Listen, Richie.
Where you going to the question, right?
Again here.
Hope you're not asking me a pseudo.
Let me ask you the question again.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask it to you in another way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show me confirmation that Temple Mount that they are fighting over, one that I've never heard of before, is in fact Solomon's Temple Mount? And can you give me the location of it now, archaeologically? Can I get some data on that right now?
So basically, you want me to go into like kind of like what I call it the flat Earth realm, meaning that I have to stop believing NASA.
I mentioned
listen, what I'm saying. I got to stop believing in NASA and the images of the Earth and everything to basically say, okay, you know what? They lied to me. So what you're saying is that we're being lied to. That's basically the Solomon's Temple right now. That we cannot believe that the archaeology they found over there, that's not Solomon's Temple. That's what you're saying?
Okay.
But this is what, everybody in the world sees, okay, that's where the temple used to be. So you're basically saying there's a minority view out here that believes that's not the Temple Mount?
There's not a minority view. It's a very large view, and I love the way you tried to minimize that. But I don't think that you're really understanding my question and you're skillfully dodging the question. So let me just answer it for you. There is no Solomon's temple. It never existed because Solomon never existed.
So you're saying...
Hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'll let you rock.
Yeah.
Let you rock. And I'm being very calm here, right? Solomon, David never
existed. Stay calm, MVP. Stay calm.
They are mythological kings that are used to enhance a group of people that really did not have a history for themselves. So I'm asking you for an archaeological excavation. If you ask me to go into Egypt and prove something, I'm pretty sure 99% that I can go into Egypt. I could go into Nubia. I can go into West Africa. I can go into the Sudan. I can go into Ethiopia, and I can pull up the archaeological artifact excavation and the person who conducted it to prove what you're saying is true. You just told me that you are using a theory, and your theory is not supported in the Bible. I like you. You're a good guy, but it just doesn't make any sense. What you're saying doesn't line up.
You're jumping all over the place right now because
no. You're
using back to this temple thing right now.
Narrative. You're using the Egyptian narrative to somehow prove that the Bible is true. The Bible should be able to stand on its own, and it can't. No Egyptians ever mentioned a group of people called the Israelites. And then you mentioned the Iwer Papyrus, and I'm going to let you rock out after this. You mentioned the Iwer Papyrus, but the Iwer Papyrus was written in the 19th century BCE, not the 18th century BCE. So that's incorrect. And if you read all of the Iwer Papyrus, it tells you at the very end that it's nothing but a parable for the king so he could stay in right condition with their God. And it only mentions the god Khnum in there. I don't know what else to say. Mm-hmm. You're giving me a theory. I'm telling you what's in your book. According to the law, you're not supposed to do that.
Go ahead and get in there, Rich.
It all up, and
after this, I got a question for. After Rich respond, I got a question
all
for
over the place right now because you're talking about first. Let's go back to the temple thing. You're saying show you the temple, right? All right, show you the temple that was destroyed by the Babylonians, was rebuilt, and then No,
I said give me proof. You don't change my words. Mm-hmm. I asked you for proof. An archaeological excavation proving it, so you would be able to. You should be able to go into the stratigraphy of that claim because Kathleen Kenyon went over there in 2018 and they still ain't found nothing. She went back in 2019, she still ain't found nothing, and now they looking all the way across Jerusalem for this daggone temple, and they keep on saying every time they find something, it's an Egyptian artifact, it's an Assyrian artifact, or it's a Canaanite artifact. Every time they find something. And as a matter of fact, one of the oldest temples over there is that of Amenhotep.
So, this whole thing about the Jewish temple is still what I would call pseudo, because if that was the case, right, it would be said like, look, that's not the Jewish temple right now. It will be known. So you have to basically, now you're in the position of, you got to prove, what you call you have to get benefit of the doubt of your theory now that that's not the Jewish temple. You got to go into all that right there. So to say that, okay, where's Solomon's temple? We know the narrative. His temple was destroyed. It was rebuilt, right? It was rebuilt, renovated by King Herod, and destroyed again. All right? So where is the archaeological evidence of the Solomon's temple that was rebuilt? Think about what you're asking.
Remember, I want to remind you on something.
The proper question would be to say, where's the evidence of the temple in 70 AD? Because that's the last version of that temple.
Sir, 70 AD is only mentioned by a Jewish scribe by the name of Josephus. It's not mentioned anywhere else in history. And as a matter of fact, hold on, it's not pseudo, sir. As a matter of fact, your theory is pseudo because it doesn't even line up with the biblical narrative. You are now way in 70 AD, and you are the affirmative in this debate, and you can't even properly say this is the timeline of the Exodus when the geographical sites, place names, and the king that's mentioned, the king city who personally built it, is all mentioned in the 13th, 7th, 6th, 5th, 3rd, and 2nd century. We know Ramses was one of the greatest kings, and he's mentioned in the 13th century BCE, and yet you're talking about the 18th century BCE. So if you all left, there's no way you could have built the temple, built that city according to Exodus 1 and 11, which is the slave narrative. So you're the affirmative, and you're not proving anything. You are all over the place. And the reason why you're saying that I'm all over the place, because I'm addressing everything in the Bible that's all over the place.
Yeah, you are. As I'm showing you. We could basically
I don't know what else to say, bro. I think we can call it beloved. I like you. You're a good dude. I really did enjoy this one, but I don't see what you're saying is factual. It's a great theory that will work against a layman, but not against a Chris MVP Harris, man.
But you didn't even address the theory, though. You did not even address my theory, though. You did not do it at all. But
I don't have to address your theory because the Bible is the authority.
No. You kept trying to pull it back to the timeline that doesn't make sense. You kept trying to pull David and Moses back to after the Bronze Age collapse. David and Solomon back to the Bronze Age collapse. Where basically I'm putting them where they belong.
Wait a minute, if you're putting it in a Bronze Age collapse.
No.
That is sometimes, is that what you're saying?
No. You're pulling it back. If you're gonna call David and Solomon in the 9th century BC,
hold on. When is the Bronze Age collapse, sir?
That's in like the 12th, 11th century.
The 11th century BCE.
Yeah, I have it right here. Hold on. I got all that right here.
No. I'm not disagreeing with you. What does that have to do with the Exodus when you said you all left out in the 18th century BCE?
No. Listen one more time, right? I'm gonna say it one more time. The theory I propose, right?
It's a theory.
Yes, it's a theory.
Okay, so that doesn't mean that it's true. It's just a theory.
But the point was for you to debunk my theory, not theories.
I debunked it.
No, you didn't. You kept debunking things that I wasn't saying.
Watch this. I'm gonna make this easy for you. Who was the pharaoh in the 14th dynasty? Who did you choose?
Which was 14th dynasty?
In the 14th dynastic period. You said Sheshi Ma'abre, right?
Yeah.
He was a Hyksos king, am I correct?
He was an Asiatic king, yep.
Good. Did the Ramesside kings exist during the 14th dynastic period?
No.
Okay, so why are they being mentioned in the Bible?
Okay, you missed my point to what I said about New Amsterdam, New York. If I wrote about my ancestors, right, and they lived in New Amsterdam, but I'm living in New York. But when, in my narrative, I put that when they landed in New York, am I wrong for calling it New York? Remember that analogy I gave you?
Yeah, I would consider
same thing when it comes to Ramsey.
Hold on. No, I would consider that a false equivalency because I don't think. Here, let me turn my camera back on to be fair. I don't think what you're saying is true, and here's the reason why. When you read the biblical narrative, and I think anybody would agree with me.
So wait.
Hold on, brother Bianchi.
I just want to make sure Richie got everything out because I didn't get the full.
Okay, what I'm saying is this. Okay, he's stating, did I hear his analogy on that, or his example, or his theorem on that? And yes, I did. But the problem with your theory is when you read the book, you are handcuffed to the narrative in the book. Once you start creating a new narrative, which is your theory, guess what, bro? You can just throw the book away and it's non-existent and now. Because you're handcuffed to saying Moses wrote it. You're handcuffed to saying, hey, Pharaoh Ramses III is being mentioned here, or the city of Ramses is being mentioned here, and Ramses, the Ramesside kings don't even exist in the 18th century. The Ramesside kings don't even exist.
And guess what?
In the 18th century.
And I know that.
Let's let Richie respond, and then I got a question for each of y'all.
Yeah, he's saying things I already know.
But you agreed that the Bible was the authority. Is the Bible the authority?
Hold on, Chris. Let him respond.
So I can get to my question, sir.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
and listen to what I said. I even gave you an example. When they mentioned Joseph, go. Listen to what I'm saying. They mentioned Joseph going to the land of Ramses, right? So listen to what I'm saying. If the Exodus happened in the times of Ramses, right? Because what you're saying is that because it says Ramses, it had to happen in that time, right? Why are you mentioning the lands of Ramses with Joseph? It goes to show, I'm trying to show to you, it shows you that when the Bible we have today was written, compiled from the earlier manuscripts that Moses probably wrote, the Proto-Sinaitic scripts, that it was written during the time of Ramses, right? But the city of Ramses was also the city of Avaris in the place where I'm placing the Exodus. So what I'm saying is that the ancestors are writing about the Exodus in the city of Ramses, in the times of Ramses, but about Avaris. You get what I'm saying?
No, because you want to know why? You don't get what I'm saying. It even says if they're writing in a timeline of past, why are they saying that Abraham fought against Philistine kings? What would be that point? You want to know why? I'm going to explain this to you, and I'm going to explain it with a theory that has already been proven. You have the JDEP source, Yahweh source, Deuteronistic source, Elohist source, and priestly text. All four of these are sources that have been entered into the Bible. The Elohist source would be the time in which these people worshipped El. The Yahweh source would be that in which they worshipped Yahweh. The Deuteronistic text would be the text that was written sometimes and composed during the 6th through 5th century BCE after the Babylonian captivity. And the priestly text would be that concerning their rituals. So you have four different sources being entered into this text at one time. That is the problem that you guys have with your text. And that is all I have to say. Hold on, let me say this. Yeah. Let me say this real quick, because I can go on all night with this and I can light it up. I did not accept your theory. Your job was to prove your theory was correct. I never accept, and I want to let the audience know that he is the affirmative in this, and he is supposed to be proving that it existed. And instead, he created a new timeline against his own biblical text, in which he said it was the authority. So
let Richie get in here, because I need to ask both of y'all a question. Go ahead, Richie.
I mean, he just admitted that he didn't address my theory because he's not accepting it, right? But even when you mention all those P source, Q, all them sources, right? Do you think the Bible was written when Joseph was in Egypt? Or do you know if the narrative that the Bible was written when Moses came after Joseph, right? So you cannot expect the Bible to be written.
Are you asking me that?
No.
Okay.
You cannot expect the Bible to be written in the time of Joseph, in the time of Abraham. It has to be written at a time after them. So when you have them mention the Philistines, mention the city of P. Ramses, that's evidence that the Bible was written in that time period, the 12th century.
Sir, you would have to prove.
You know what I'm saying?
No,
that is evidence.
Okay, look. I know we can do this all night. Let me ask. I got a question for you.
He understands what I'm saying too. That's why you're smart enough. You're smart enough to know what I'm saying.
I don't accept your theory.
You do.
No.
Yeah, you do.
No.
I got a question for each of y'all. So I'm gonna start with Richie. And this is just for Richie. So now, given that we've established that during the time most people think that the Exodus happened, that Kemet was in control of Canaan. So you would have essentially been leaving Kemet for Kemet. And then you surmised that it wasn't the African or indigenous Kemites that enslaved the Israelites, that it was actually the Hekakasu, as we call them, or the Hyksos, which to me would be more in their character, since we know Kemet only had 3 types of slavery. And check out my presentation Sunday where I'm re-uploading Checkmate, where I'm giving context to certain.
I'm happy he got 16 points in the fantasy. Forgive me, guys. Go ahead.
but I'm re-uploading Checkmate where I get context to certain talking points that my Hebrew and Christian brothers and sisters have about Kemet. So and in there I talk about the 3 types of slavery they had, which were bond servitude, what we know as chattel slavery, chattel slavery was more so for criminals who had committed heinous crimes, and it was used as a punishment, or for people who had been taken as prisoners of war. Well, so that wouldn't fit the biblical narrative. And so your theory is interesting to me from that standpoint, because if it was these Asiatics, we know that type of slavery was very much in their character to do. So with that being said, though, given everything that MVP laid out, with the shifting of the timeline, do you, because I know you said it's a theory, do you have any considerations that theory may not hold up, considering how much altering has to be done, or at least the perception that so much altering has to be done for it to fit? Do you have any reservations about continuing with the theory?
Yeah, I mean, no altering has to be done. The only altering that has to be done, and this is the only weakness in my theory, which I mentioned at the end of the presentation, you have to reduce the timeline of this 3rd intermediate period by 300 years. Because if I bring back the biblical timeline that much, by the time we get to after, the Shishak of the Bible, which I'm calling Meneptah, by the time we get to like the Battle of Megiddo from Necto II, that's going to bring it to like 900 BC. But we know that battle happened within like the 7th to 6th century BC. So that's the issue. That's the only issue with my theory, is that you have to reduce the 3rd intermediate period. Other than that, you're not changing nothing. you're taking the Bible as literal, right? And you finding the evidence of, where can we find evidence of, of a reduced male population of Asiatics, right? You find that in that time period. Where can we find a time period where, if plagues happen, it would basically damage the whole nation? You have that in that time period. You have like he says, the Apocryphal Papyrus was some parable of a time, but you still have, scholarship saying that something major happened in that time period for these dynasties to fall, the 13th or 14th dynasty. And even when it comes to trying to find evidence of slaves, where you couldn't find in the New Kingdom, but you do find evidence of Hebrew of Asiatic slave names. It was like a short list in the Memphis Kingdom. But since we know that the North Kingdom, or Lower Egypt, had trade with the Lower Kingdom, the 14th, 13th dynasties, it makes perfect sense to assume that there was trade of slaves to that kingdom. But the majority of the slaves will be with the Asiatic rulers. So there is no basically altering of the biblical timeline. There's no altering of Egyptian narrative. It's the only thing that it comes down to. And the only thing that Chris has against this, which he hasn't used, is basically me and other people out there like David Roll he mentioned. And there's other people out here looking at this whole thing too when it comes to the third intermediate period, that what it does, it creates dark ages for the Greeks, creates dark ages for a whole bunch of other civilizations, because we probably put that time period too long, 400 years of uncertainty. So I'm not going to base my salvation on 400 years of uncertainty. You understand what I'm saying? So no, I don't find no issue with my theory. What I'm saying, when it comes to the Bible, changing the Bible, because I haven't changed the Bible and I haven't changed Egypt at all. The only thing I changed was the third intermediate period. That's the only thing I changed. If you was paying attention.
Now that's when you say only, that's a big
yeah.
change. That's a big change. So
I will fight against that then.
Yeah, let me
I'm being
go
honest though, but to keep it real, I'm being honest though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
All the
no.
stuff he said though about the thing, everything fits though. Everything fits.
I respect it, because and you're keeping it a buck with saying that you have to alter that period. So I'm not mad at it. MVP.
What's going on?
My question for you. So given what the evidence that our brother showed, particularly the fact that he's saying that these were not indigenous commissions, Kemetu, that did this, it would have been a Hekakasu. And the fact that he showed that multicolored coat, did I say that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he showed that as evidence, do you give any consideration or reconsideration to the possibility that this narrative could have taken place in some form, even if it's not strictly accurate with what the Bible says, but that it happened in some form or fashion, considering the evidence that the brother laid out? Again, with the multicolored coats, the fact that he's saying it wouldn't the indigenous commissions, but the Hekakasu, or the foreign rulers we know as the Sea People or the Hyksos. Any reconsideration that this narrative may have happened in some form or fashion?
No.
Short answer. No. Okay, so now elaborate on why.
First thing is, when he mentions this Pharaoh Shishi Ma'abre, this king never suffered any of those biblical curses by that king. He never makes a report of any of these huge amount of people leaving out of Egypt. He didn't address any of that. As a matter of fact, instead of addressing Sheshi Ma'abre and the events or the political situation concerning him, he instead ran to, or excuse me, I swallowed that lemonade. Oh, shoot, excuse me. Instead, Yahweh must not want me to talk and bring this truth out.
I'm about to say, Yahweh didn't
now I'm drinking some lemon lime lemonade here, and it went down the wrong pipe. And y'all ever had that happen? You be trying to like get it up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so What I'm trying to sit up here and say is what instead he tried to do was piece together and create a timeline using events or ancient Egyptian papyruses. And that's why his methodology is flawed. Let's look at the things he used. He used the Iwer papyrus to give inference, which is a 19th century text. He uses the Harris papyrus, which is a 12th century text. Then he used the he went to the Merneptah stele, which is a 13th century stele. Now, the thing about steles is a stele is not empirical evidence. It's not empirical at all, because Ramses has steles where he wars with the Philistines and the Hittites, and he says he won every single one of his battles. But we know historically he did not win every one of his battles against the Hittites. You understand what I'm saying? But let's get back to the purported evidence that he showed. His theory goes against that of the biblical narrative. One, the Bible never mentions Merneptah. Two, the Bible never mentions Sheshi Ma'abre, which was a Hyksos king. And three, the Hyksos people or the Amu people who entered in sometimes during the 19th century BCE, it took them 200 years to take control of Kemet. For some odd reason, in the biblical narrative, they have that they were slaves there. This is why Ezekiel 16:1 is so important when it says that your mother was an Amorite and your father a Hittite. You see what I'm saying? Abraham, Joseph, and Isaac, and Jacob, that is what you call etiology. They wrote stories about these eponymous ancestors to give themselves a history that they can't prove. It's a form of mythology. It's like Remus and Romulus, right? Romans said they come from a set of twins, right? Cosmologically, we see Egypt has a set of twins with Haru and Set, or a set of brothers. You see a lot of this in eponymous ancestry, in which you provided, not your time. What you provided certainly didn't prove in Exodus, sir. You never showed the destruction of any god destroying Egypt during the time of Sheshi Ma'abre. And this is why I say you piece together a timeline using a, this is not an insult, so please forgive me if it sounds that way, a pseudo theory. And I say that respectfully, because I can respect that, because at least you are reading and you're trying to put it together. But most of it is David Rowe. Yeah. I clearly hear that. Because whenever you change it to Merneptah, I'm like, that's David Rowe. I heard that, and he's been debunked millions of times over. But the reason why I didn't bring up David Rowe being debunked, because Chris Harris didn't need to. I can go right inside this book. You didn't give any archaeological evidence. The Christian understanding is that, or the scientific Judaic method is that David lived sometimes during the first millennium BCE. You then put his son Solomon with Ramses. So therefore, Ramses would never have allowed a king to live in the land of Canaan over him. That would be a direct threat to the throne, where Ramses, guess what, Brother Pianki? He wore the crown of what? Both lands. He wore the crown of both lands. He was the supreme ruler. And as a matter of fact, in his temple, the people of Canaan are coming to pay tribute to him. It's just that simple. So we got to get our history right and stop making these type of claims against Egypt. Because unless you could show me a group of people called Israelites, and the Habiru have nothing to do with Israelites, because Habiru means dusty and dirty, and Eber means one who's crossed over, Ha being the definite article. You have to be a little bit better than that. So a lot of the stuff that you're proposing, albeit it's interesting and I like you, it's just incorrect. It doesn't line up with the biblical.
When did you date the papyrus? What were the dates you gave?
I gave for the Iwer papyrus the 19th century BCE. 19th
century BCE, right? The actual papyrus?
Redacted, and it was redacted again in the 12th century BCE. They rewrote it in the 12th century BCE.
Okay, but the only evidence we have of the Iwer papyrus is the 12th century one. We don't have no papyrus from the 19th century BCE.
No, we understand that it's the 19th century BCE because of the.
No, okay.
Now you have to let me
finish. You did right there.
Watch this. I'm gonna kill this real quick.
Papyrus we have dates to the 12th century BC, to the time of Ramses' era, right? The New Kingdom, right?
But the reason why
they say, listen now,
answer that.
It talks about a period.
Let them go, Chris. You respond
from before the second intermediate period, right? So it's just conjecture now which period that belongs to, because guess what? The period name is a name typical of the period from 1850 to 1450 BCE. So that they could be anywhere between them. But the actual papyrus is dated to the 12th century. You can You made an error when you said
real quick.
You made an error. Let me finish. You made a big error when you said that it was dated to the 19th century BCE.
Okay.
You made a big error when you said that.
Let me know when you're finished, because I'm gonna prove you wrong on that.
You good, Rich?
Yeah, I'm good.
Go ahead,
okay. Chris. Regardless of how you feel about it, even if you say that the Iwer papyrus, and you hang yourself again with your theory, because the Iwer papyrus is now a 12th century BCE text, and it's only explaining. Hold on, it's only explaining a time of the 12th century BCE, right?
No, it's not.
But you said okay, but it says that it's explaining a time in the 18th
the text
century
itself.
BCE.
The text itself talks about a period. Even when they wrote it, when the Ramses people wrote it, right?
Yes, and hold on. Here we go. He died. He about to die. You want to know how I know you're going to die on this one? Because the Iwer papyrus talks about Asiatics invading their land, not leaving. That's a dagger. The Israelites were Asiatics, and they left.
Okay,
they
but
left.
Listen. If you follow my theory, listen. No. If you follow my theory, the Exodus occurred. Exodus occurred in the fourth. Listen, the Exodus occurred in the 14th dynasty, right? The 14th dynasty and the 13th dynasty fell to the 15th dynasty, which was still an Asiatic dynasty. So it doesn't change nothing. It still basically fits a theory. You feel what I'm saying?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Let me. Do y'all want to open it up for questions from the chat, or y'all want to continue to bid?
Here, I wanna let's highlight this here real quick, because according to the Dutch National Museum in Leiden, the Netherlands, and I think I'm gonna listen to them over to you. I just pulled this up in the on Wikipedia, albeit I don't like doing it. But it says right here, let me get a screen share up right here, because you would have to show me where your information is correct, because once again, you're dealing in theorem. I'm dealing with the research here according to archaeologists and curators here. And I want to pull this up real quick. And this is what it says about the Iwer papyrus. Let me get it right here. It says the Iwer papyrus is an ancient Egyptian hieratic papyrus.
Expanded a little bit, Chris.
Expanded?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Oops, that's too much. Excuse me. That is it. Can you see it? Okay. It says it's an ancient Egyptian hieratic papyrus made during the 19th dynastic period of Egypt and now held in the Dutch antiquities in Netherlands. It contains the admonitions of Iwer, who was a priest whose original composition is dated no earlier than the 12th dynasty of Egypt, which is the 19th century BCE to the 18th century BCE. This is what it says.
But
this is what they are saying.
Go down to where it says the discussion part of Wikipedia.
Oh, let's continue on. In the poem, Iwer, a name typical of the period of 1850 to 1450 BCE, complains that the world has been turned upside down. A woman who had not a single box has furniture. A girl who looked her in the face in the water now owns a mirror, while the one rich man is now in rags. He demands that the Lord of all. What do you want me to read here?
Yeah, the discussion.
Okay. This is a discussion. So it says the Iwer papyrus has been dated no earlier than the 19th
dynasty around 1250 BCE. So this is what you're mistaken now.
No. Hold on. I want to explain what you're doing. This is what we call confirmation bias. We have to take all the data into consideration here, because it said the name Iwer is a name, and the god Khnum are earlier names and gods that were worshipped sometimes during the 11th dynastic period. That's why you have to understand the history of ancient Kemet before you get to trying to make inferences and assertions to their text, trying to find Yahweh in a biblical Exodus. And if you're saying that this is talking about a later time, as you just said, oh, it's talking about a later time. It's not talking about the 12th century BCE. It's talking about something that happened in the 18th century BCE. That would mean you're contradicting yourself on
No.
point.
Listen to what it is. You're not reading it. The Ipura papyrus has been dated no earlier than the 19th dynasty, around 1250 BC. So
it said that
listen.
it was dated.
Rich, let
it
him
was
go,
also
let him go.
dated in the 19th, in no later than the 12th dynasty. Also, it also said that. So there are many different commentaries on it.
Because this is Wikipedia.
Go ahead, Rich.
This is Wikipedia. So when you look at other sites, right? This is what they talk about the Ipura papyrus. That the actual document itself, right? When you date the document, the papyrus on there, it dates to the 12th century BC, the 19th dynasty, right?
Okay.
And it probably was written during that time from maybe an older manuscript, right? Which we don't have. Okay. We know paper burns. That's why the Bible was always written over and over. But what they say about what they say about this papyrus is that it talks about a period from before the from the 13th and 14th dynasties. They give that time period to what it says from what you said, right, the 12th dynasty of Egypt. But when you look at the content, it says the Ipura, the name is a name typical of the period between 1850 to 1450, which means that it could happen anywhere between those dates right there. You understand what I'm saying? So the actual
you're agreeing with me.
Yes, I never. But what you said though was that the papyrus was dated to the 19th century, and it was not dated to the 19th century. It was dated to the 12th century.
Sir, listen to what I'm sitting up there saying here. You're now using the Ewuper papyrus to make an assertion that a Exodus happened when the Ewuper papyrus mentions nothing about the firstborn son of the king or the Egyptians dying. It mentions Asiatics coming into their land causing turmoil.
It mentions a lot more than that.
The Asiatics are causing turmoil, not a God named Yahweh. And certainly the king would know about Yahweh because Moses promised the king that Yahweh would do that.
So why would
these are assertions made on this text?
No. Why would, logically speaking, why would the Egyptians know about Yahweh when Yahweh was revealed to the Israelites?
Sir, it's just a religious text. They don't.
No. Answer that question. Why would
you have to? Your job is to prove it.
No, listen what I'm saying.
I've answered every question for you. What you're doing is making assertions about ancient Egyptian texts.
Ancient Egyptian texts?
Yes, the Ewuper papyrus is an ancient Egyptian text.
Yeah, exactly. I never stopped saying that, but what?
It's clearly a parable.
This is what I'm saying.
That the Asiatics
let them get it out, Chris. Let them get it out.
This is what I'm saying, right? The papyrus has nothing to do with the Bible. Let's get that out. Let's get that out of the way. Obviously, it has nothing to do with the Bible. It's separate from the Bible. What I'm saying is that it talks about plagues that happened in Egypt in the time period of the Exodus, right? And those plagues match the biblical plagues. So all I'm saying is that for those who say that Egypt did not talk about the biblical plagues, I'm saying, yes, they did. They talked about similarities. So for you to say, okay, that never happened, well, Egyptians said something like that happened because what basically tore up the 13th and 14th dynasty. You know what I'm saying? They claim that plagues tore up their dynasty. Long-term famine. When you look at the biblical plagues, the river turning into blood, natural phenomenon. Frogs, locusts, storming in land. We see that happen in natural phenomenons that God used.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Does it say in this Ewuper papyrus, because you're making a lot of searches, does it say Yahweh did it or Khnum did it?
Why would it say how Yahweh did it? It's Egyptian text.
It says Khnum did it.
But why would it say Yahweh did it?
Because it tells you culturally this is a parabolic story about something that's going on in Egypt that's not true. And it also
why would it say Yahweh? Why would you expect Yahweh in the text?
One more time. I'm being very nice here with it. This once again, it does not. This does not help your theory. It says that Asiatics have come into their land and caused
15th dynasty. That's what happened. 15th dynasty came into land.
No. The 13th dynasty. This happened under. When you're talking about the 13th dynasty, you're talking about how the South, which is the North, capitulated under the Hyksos rulers. Okay. Serenacet failed.
The 15th dynasty took over the 14th.
Now you're in the 15th dynasty.
No. You're talking about Asiatics coming into the land, taking over the land, right? Okay, let me ask you a question. Was the 15th dynasty Asiatics? Yes or no? Yes, right?
Yes, they were.
Were the 14th dynasty Asiatics, right?
Yes or no?
They
were.
So now, did the 13th and 14th dynasty fall together?
Did the 13th and 14th dynasty fall together?
Yes.
No, they were congruent with each other.
No.
Sir, the 13th, 14th, and 15th
No,
dynasty
you don't know the
periods are
narrative about the 14th
intermediary
dynasty.
periods. It never fell. It was the Hyksos rule. What are you talking about?
No.
Where are you getting your narrative from, sir?
All right, brothers. This has been an excellent build, and I appreciate the respect shown. Question: do y'all want to take questions from the chat? Not too many, but
I think I'm done. Now I've been going on long enough. If he wants to argue with the chat, go right ahead.
So with that being said, you in agreement with that, Richie? We can, because I can let both of y'all close out and we can wrap this thing up. But I think it's been a good discussion.
And I can keep going because I know what he's running from, but it's fine. You know what I'm saying? Because we can keep going and go into the facts of the 13th and 14th dynasties to show you that the 14th dynasty, 15th dynasty,
Sir, your book,
they were different.
Hold on.
I have it up here from
your
the Egyptian
book
website.
Is not expressing a narrative in the 18th century BCE with Ramses being mentioned. Unless you can show me Israelites, you are just pontificating at this point.
I'm reading from ancientegypt.org. Ancientegypt.org. During the second half of the dynasty.
Ancientegypt.org, really?
But regardless, though, listen to what it's saying. During the second half of the dynasty, this is talking about the 14th dynasty, several kings included the words nourishment and provisions into their throne names, and this seems to indicate that food may have become a very important political factor. There's also a drastic increase in burials.
Sir. I don't have to.
There is also a drastic increase in burials at this time.
The Nile didn't rise at a certain time.
As mass graves. This suggests that the latter half of the 14th dynasty was ravaged by famine and plagues. The rapid succession of kings at this time showed that even the most powerful could not be protected from illness. The short reigns also de-established and weakened the central authority of the 14th dynasty, making it no match for the invading troops of a foreign people known as the Hyksos. So basically,
you're talking about the Hyksos. You're not talking about any Israelites.
No, listen to what I'm saying.
You sound silly at this point.
Back to the Ipupa. I'm a very logical person. Back to the Ipupa Papyrus. You said that basically it talks about Asiatics coming into the land and taking over.
Sir, this does not fit your biblical narrative. You're making an assertion and you are shoehorning at this point because of the political upheaval that was going on, which caused the 12th dynastic period to fall, which caused the indigenous people to fall.
The 12th?
The 12th dynastic period is which.
Who's talking about the 12? Who's talking about the 12?
Let me explain to you the historical narrative that is proven in ancient Egypt. Amenemhat was the one who had the entire area pacified from the Asiatics. His son Serenaset was the one who caused it to fail. He did not protect the people, and he continued to allow these people to proliferate in the north. They then took over the north by being put in high political positions, enslaving the Egyptians. This is how the dynastic period failed. Pause. What is the difference between a dynastic period and an intermediary period? Tell me.
No, you tell me.
A dynastic period, there is one king native of Egypt. An intermediary period means there's political upheaval going on, and there are two kings. Anytime Kemet fell into chaos, they came from the south to put that shit back in order. And when Tutmos, Amos, and secondary came in there, they put an ass whooping on them Asiatics, and they kicked their dirty asses on up out of there. And I praise Tutmos for what he did. I worship Tutmos.
Get in the crowd. Get in the crowd.
I love Tutmos. Oh, Tutmos, we love you, Tutmos, for what you did, kicking them flea-bitten Israelites, Amorites, and
But guess what, bro? But guess what? The 12th dynasty, the 13th dynasty, 11th dynasty, they love the Asiatics. That's why they love the Asiatics. The 12th dynasty loved the Asiatics. You know why? The tomb of Amenhotep.
That's why they failed.
Asiatics coming to a tomb of an Egyptian if they hated each other.
One more time.
13th dynasty, there's evidence.
All right.
14th dynasty had traded with each other. We have evidence of that, of the 13th dynasty and the 14th dynasty trading with each other. So you got to go back and read the Egyptian history, boy.
It's been a great build. I appreciate both brothers.
Boy, crazy.
Richie, I'm gonna have you come back on and just and do this just do a presentation on your whole theory if you got.
Yeah. And like I said, a brother said in the chat that it's not a new theory. It's not a new theory. I'm not the only one holding this theory.
Okay, so take 5 minutes, close out, tell people what you got going on, particularly with your film, and where they can find you, etc.
Yeah. So my thing is tonight. If you really listen to what I said, you will come to the conclusion that there's nothing observed that contradicts the Bible. Yes, I am, suggesting that we take off 300 years from a period of uncertainty, the third intermediate period. That may be a big thing to a lot of people, but when you look at it, though, right? It's not just about fixing Israelite history. It's about all history, Egyptian history, Greek history, because you even take away the 400 years of that time period, you only have 100 years of what you call the Greek Dark Ages. The thing is that like the Greeks were stupid for 400 years. They were smart. All of a sudden they got stupid. Blah 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 blah. All of a sudden they came back and they figured out the Earth was round. But now when you reduce that time period, it just shows that maybe we have to go back and look at this this third intermediate period, that maybe we did put too much time on it. But other than that, though, none of this stuff I said is going to save your souls. The only thing that's going to save your souls is Jesus Christ. And that's all I got to say tonight. Bang!
Oh, my God.
All right, MVP. Take 5 minutes, close out. Let everybody know where to find you, bro.
I'm drinking some water here. All right. 1 second. Give me a sec. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, my God. This is typical. Give me a second here. Let me put my glasses back on. Okay, let me get my camera back on out of respect. Okay, typical, guys. All right, so let's take a look here. The gentleman clearly said that he wasn't using revisionism. Then he turns around and says that he revised the 13th dynasty in order to try and make his theory fit. Not to mention, he never showed any archaeological evidence of any Exodus. He never proved Moses existed. He never addressed any of the anachronisms properly. Instead, he just used a false equivocation mentioning New York and Amsterdam, but it mentions that they built the city of Ramses. Ramses didn't exist yet, so there's no way that they can build the city of Ramses. Not to mention, it mentions that what's his name, Abraham is fighting the Philistines. So that means y'all would not even have been alive or on the earth or even thought of yet. Y'all were still swimming around in Jacob's nuts. No disrespect, but y'all were still swimming around in his nuts. So that wouldn't even make y'all a modern people. Okay, that means y'all didn't even exist yet if Abraham is fighting against Philistines who don't get there until the 12th century BCE. You try to force feed the narrative into the Irwa papyrus, but also we have the tale of Senhui, in which is a shepherd king flees the evil Pharaoh, goes over into the land of Canaan, comes back into the land of Egypt. That's the tale of Senhui. We also have the story of the heavenly cow, in which Tahuti, whose real name becomes Masher, which means true speaker, he goes into the mountains and receives the divine law. So it's evident to say that you guys were borrowing mythology from the Egyptians. And in order to express that this narrative in fact existed, you have to first believe it. 2, you're handcuffed to saying Moses wrote it because it said he placed the 5 books in the ark. And what language would he have written it in the 18th century BCE if he existed? There was no Hebrew. Proto-Sinaitic, I dare you to say it was Proto-Sinaitic. You would have died on that. Like I said, people, he came with a theory. It was flawed. The methodology was off. And like we all heard him say, the only person that's going to free your souls is Jesus. Okay? When guess what, y'all? Let me say it like I always say in closing, and Brother Pianki know it's coming. Check it out. Abraham never existed. Isaac, Jacob never existed. David, Saul never existed. Josiah never existed. Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel never existed. They are nothing but fictional religious folklore that has gotten into the mind of the African and destroyed us, and we no longer want to be African. For us to accept this tale is to properly excoriate ourselves from our ancient historical traditions to believe a mythology. And when we believe these mythologies and we don't believe real goddamn kings that was buried in golden graves, real kings that built real tombs, real kings that built archaeological pyramids using scientific technology, real kings that ruled, real kings that were called gods on earth, not a fictional Jesus, not a fictional Abraham. We had Ramses, we had Tutmos, we had Hornreb, we had Narmer, we had kings that actually fought real wars, real campaigns that marched all the way across the Euphrates, and we excoriate them because of the goddamn Bible. Fuck Yahweh and fuck Jesus. Chris Harris, MVP, I'm out.
MVP Chris Harris, ladies and gentlemen. MVP Chris Harris.
He talks like a
Well,
preacher.
I was going to thank the brother for coming on, but I still thank him for coming on. Obviously, I thank you, my brother. Like I said, I definitely look forward to you coming on and doing a full presentation on that theory.
Yeah, definitely. So if we go to I have to kind of rush it too, you know what I'm saying? But I think when people see it, they'll understand where I'm coming from, that I'm not changing no history. Like I said, the only thing is that third intermediate period, but I look forward to the next time, man. I loved it too. I mean, even Chris, man. I still love the guy, man. You know what I'm saying? Because even Jesus said, you speak any word against me, you could still be forgiven. So he's just talking.
Yeah, nah. And why I gotta be kidding you, Kansu? Because I'm curious. I want to see the brother presentation. That ain't no joke. Well, I mean, I don't even understand that statement. But that said, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, bro. Obviously, I appreciate MVP. So tell y'all what I got going on. Me and Robert Ash gonna have a follow-up to our conversation. We're gonna talk about why does the God of the Bible allow evil? That's not this weekend, but the next weekend. It'll be on Saturday again, and I'll get that information out to you. And then look for the re-upload of Checkmate, where I give context to some misguided teachings that some of my Christian and Hebrew brothers have about ancient Kemet. Not saying that what they said wasn't true or didn't happen. I'm just giving context to it. So look for that Sunday. So that said, this has been another great show, another great build. Again, appreciate brothers for coming on, showing a lot of respect to each other, showing a lot of pride in what they do. And so we're going to get back at you again with another show coming up soon. We'll get that information out to you. Till then, that's peace.